Okay, folks, we are back. This is Street to Strategy. We have a new episode. I just want to say to the folks at home, man, people reached out about the last episode with Marco. I had a lot of COs reach out and show me a lot of love. He got a lot of good comments. I truly love that. Today's episode is going to be great. It's going to be a little emotional, but let's get to it. He didn't grow up dreaming about a badge. He grew up learning how to survive. His childhood wasn't troubled. It was lawless. Drugs, violence, and instability weren't moments. They were the air he breathed. Walls absorbed arguments before they ever heard laughter. Shadows stretched long across his parents' choices, dealing drugs, using them, and unleashing domestic violence that would later make even his worst calls as a cop feel familiar. The last time it happened, he didn't wait for somebody else to step in. He stepped in. He fought his stepfather with his own hands. Years later, life came full circle. He ran into that same man again, this time on opposite sides of the law. A badge in his hand, parole on the other shoulders. Not long after, that man died the way he had always lived, running, motorcycle, police lights, a fate written long before its moment. They were poor, bone deep, raw poor. The kind of poverty that teaches children adult lessons too early. He and his brother roamed the streets collecting cans so there would be food that night. Food stamps were traded for money so his mother could buy cigarettes and alcohol. He remembers the bitter monotony of picking seeds from marijuana meant for sale. He remembers finding a bag of methamphetamine, asking what it was, and getting slapped. Innocence punished, ignorance made dangerous. One memory, though, towers over them all. Someone built a bomb, a propane tank wrapped in nails. They set it off in front of their house. Metal tore through the walls. Shrapnel lodged itself in the home they were supposed to feel safe in. There were no sirens, no headlines, just another night where survival was the law. He hated that life. He hated lawlessness. He hated the way chaos felt inevitable. And he remembers the police coming, not as heroes, not as saviors, but as proof that nothing would really change. As a kid, he thought the police didn't care. He didn't understand the system yet. All he knew was one truth. No one was coming to save them. So he decided not to admire the badge, but to earn it. Not to repeat the failures, but to be better than those who had failed him. That choice changed everything. He became a reserve fireman for the Lindsay Fire Department, a reserve police officer for the Lindsay Police Department, 2 years of service to a city that had given him little in return. He transferred to the Porterville Police Department, patrol first, then DUI enforcement. 218 arrests his first year, 324 the next, nearly 290 in the third. He then became a detective, working crimes against women and children. He pushed the department to join the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, writing grants, securing equipment, taking the fight to sexual predators. He served on SWAT, faced armed men, and never once let the fear define him. Law school came next, internships with Magic and the Fresno County District Attorney's Office. He and I were both blackballed by the Tulare County District Attorney's Office for daring to help our good friend Ralph Cable run for district attorney. He would have been a prosecutor, but his brother, a fellow police officer, was murdered by his ex-wife. He was pulled into family court, fighting repeatedly for his nephew's future. That boy would later become his son. 4 attorneys later, he finally found one who saw his drive, his ability, his unshakable resolve, who offered him a job at a law school His brother's death was unbearable. The worst part was how he found out. Courtrooms became battlegrounds, not just for justice, but for the truth itself. The first trial ended in a mistrial over a single juror. The second trial was even worse. The killer's defense brought in 3 public defenders and 2 of their families who shadowed the courtroom, sowing conflict at every turn. Every complaint, every past relationship, every flaw of his brother's life was weaponized. The trials were less about right or wrong and more about tearing down his brother's legacy to protect the killer. Through it all, he carried the lessons of his youth. The chaos, the lawlessness, the nights where survival was the only law. Those scars became the foundation. The pain became fuel. The failures of others became his standard to rise above. This episode is about journey and where he came from, what he endured, what he learned, and how the boy who learned to survive became the man who could protect, fight, and endure. Sit down, buckle up, and lock in. This story is about trauma, but it ends in an inspirational way that should be uplifting to anyone who listens. Let's welcome my guest. This is Matthew Green. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Man, dude, that's a lot to get out, man. But dude, I mean, you know, it's like it's so weird. We've always kind of been connected in a way just through law enforcement and then Ralph and everything. And so it's a true honor to have you on. And there's not many people that come on this show that are more educated than me, but you are. And I always like to engage with people that are on my level. And I think you and a few others are on my level and actually above. But when people look at you now, what do they get wrong about where you came from?
Well, I mean, whether it's today or while I was in law enforcement, I think the biggest thing they got wrong was just assuming and, not to create, chaos, or drama. But, I can't remember how many times I've heard over, the course of my life, people assuming that because I'm white, and professional, that I grew up in in a nice home with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I remember hearing that, especially in law enforcement, guys that would arrest just make those assumptions, right?
I've heard it too, brother.
You don't know what I'm going through. I'm doing what I got to do to get by or to survive. And, I would disagree and say, no, you don't. You can go get a job, get 2 jobs, get 3 jobs. I once worked 3 jobs. And so I think that's the biggest thing is people making assumptions. And whether it was staying out of crime to take care of the bills or even get through law school, they don't offer scholarships for white guys.
No, they don't.
And so that's probably the biggest thing I think that people get wrong.
Yeah, and you know what, man? I heard the same stuff, man, and I used to tell a lot of these crooks, hey, dude, I grew up ghetto fabulous. I go, but I'm telling you something right now. I'm giving you solutions and you're giving me excuses, man. And they would get pissed off when I would say that, but I'd be like, but you're right. Hey, dude, life is choices. That's really what it is. Me and you both made a decision to go get highly educated. We made a decision to become cops. We made a decision not to get sucked into crime when it could have been so easy to do so.
Right.
And dude, it's
especially when that's what you see. Right?
Big time. Yeah. My mom wasn't into crime, man, but dude, I lived in some apartments, bro, being the only white kid with red hair and freckles, dude. Mm-hmm. I used to fight my ass off. I hated it, but I realized, dude, it was such a blessing later on in life, dude. It really was.
I agree. I was thinking, is sometimes the fire that burns inside you is harder than the fire that burns outside, and it leaves you sort of protected.
Well, there's guys like us too, man, where man, dude, my mom didn't have a high school diploma, bro.
Yeah.
And here I am with a fucking master's degree, dude. It's like I tell people, man, there's something about growing up like that, poor, not having anything.
Mhm.
I think too, man, because my dad wasn't around, man, I had this big chip on my shoulder. And I just remember all through my life, I'm like, I'm going to show you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I know your story is very similar, man.
Right,
You know,
right.
and what's your first memory that lets you know that your childhood was not safe?
Oh man, the first one. It was, well, I'll tell you, I guess. And it was something that sort of, helped me get through life. And that was, I was probably 4. I think it was before kindergarten, sitting outside my front, I can't say house, it was a trailer.
A mobile home?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Playing in the dirt. And the stranger walks up, and says, it was a preacher, and he was, just going out and trying to, bring people to church. And he had a lady with him, and, they were talking about God. And, I grew up in a godless house, but I sat there and I'm listening and, playing in I think I was making mud pies at the time and, just water and mud and, ice cream we do ice cream after church. And I was like, okay, so
I'm all in.
yeah. And, so they asked me to go to church and, I was like, sure, we'll come pick you up. Okay, great. My mom didn't ask any questions, just let me leave with these strangers, which turned out fine. No issues. Great. And
but how easily could that turn it into a whole other, you could have been gone forever,
yes,
bro.
It could have been terrible. But she let me leave with these strangers, and I don't even recall a conversation between them and my mom. They just showed up the next week, took me to church, and I went to church, myself, my brother, and I think my sister later on. But I realized that there was, well, I didn't realize at the time, but, looking back, there was nothing. There was no protection, it was, and it worked out, fortunately for me and for us that, they're all good people. But, I look back and there was nothing, no protection, no safety.
You know what, dude? And it's kind of funny. Later on in life, I kind of dealt with that in a certain way because I think by the time I was 15, my mom was over raising kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, dude, I would take off on a Friday. I wouldn't come home till Sunday night. That's pre-cell phones, dude.
Right?
Dude, my mom didn't. My mom did not care. It was just like, I think it was, I was out of her hair and I was skateboarding. Me and my boys, we were heavy into skateboarding. So I'd just be skating all weekend. But I look back on that and I'm thinking, dude, there's no way I would have let my daughter do that.
Right? Well, and what's sad is it just as easily could have turned out bad, right?
You could have
lived a life of crime. Same here. And no regard, no questions asked. Same here, If I left, I was gone, there was no questions,
Yeah, well, that almost turns into like a built-in babysitter, then,
right?
you guys are gone, then she can go do whatever she wants.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you were growing up in a house that could explode at any moment, either emotionally or literally?
Yes. Yes, emotionally, literally, in every sense of the way. I probably spent more time crying myself to sleep, between the ages of, 7 and 15, just wondering if, somebody was going to break into our house and kill us all, or the first time I ever saw a gun, well, maybe the only time I ever saw a gun pointed at me was showing up to my house, as after I wasn't there, when somebody set off a bomb. I was at a friend's house, but, coming back, the police were there when I got there. And, got proned out, because I'm, kid riding up on a bicycle to a scene where a bomb had just exploded. And, and seeing the things that I did and people come attack this stepdad or this stepdad, it was.
What city did you guys grow up in?
Porterville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And for the folks at home, and I'll just say, I'll put it out there. Porterville's a rough town, dude. I mean, you know what, dude? I mean, you know what? I've often said this about Porterville. I grew up in Tulare, so a lot of similarities between those two cities. Right. But there's something about Porterville. I just think it's heavily gang, a lot of dope. Every time I did a gang detail, I got into a crazy car chase at Porterville, or I got into a crazy fight.
Yeah.
And, I always joke with my wife that I saved her from Porterville. She gets pissed off, but there's some truth there, right?
Oh,
right,
there
right?
is. There is. I mean? Yeah. For sure.
As a kid, did you think that this life was normal, or did you know that you were living in something that was truly broken?
I knew it was broken, and not necessarily because I had at that time, friends or other, avenues of seeing, what was supposed to be normal. But I would watch TV, right? So when, my mom was doing her thing or whatever, the TV was on. And I'll tell you that I sort of learned the facts of life from watching The Facts of Life. Not literally. I never watched that show, but one of the things that I saw as an inspiration early on is, I'd watch shows like Family Matters, right? Carl Winslow, and or Family Matters. Seeing the way that those families, and of course it's TV, right? But I understood that what I was dealing with and the lack of parenting was not normal.
Yeah.
And I knew that that's not the way that life was supposed to be, and I knew that that's not how parents are supposed to treat their kids. So I knew, I guess, at a pretty early age that things weren't right, and also knew that things could be different.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now, you know what? And it's so funny, man. Growing up, dude. Like, I remember watching like Different Strokes, and or like even when we were in high school, the Cosbys, right?
Right.
You saw what a good dad looked like.
Yes.
And then I knew this. Well, number one, I didn't have a dad around.
Right.
But you just realize, I mean, obviously that's not real and it's make believe, but you realize those were good parents. And my mom, I wasn't saying my mom was nowhere near as bad as yours, but my mom was just mentally checked out. And so when you know that and you see it and you feel it, you realize, yeah, I'm not living in the Huxtable house. I'm living in a whole other ball game. Right. Who were you afraid of most growing up, and why?
Wow, geez. Well, I guess it depends on what part of the day. So, we grew up on the east side, east side of Porterville, and
near the cemetery.
But not quite that far.
Because my wife used to live right across the street from the cemetery.
Well, so the first few years of life, I was probably just 2 blocks away from the cemetery.
Okay.
And then it was, closer to like 10 or 15.
Yeah, because, and I'll tell you something, for the folks at home who haven't been in this neighborhood we're talking about, it's a rough neighborhood.
Yeah, east of Plano. So
yeah.
And so I remember, during the school, it was I was, my twin brother, and I were some of the only 2 white kids, and so during the school day, it was, if we wanted to play soccer, then we had to fight. It was a problem. But then after school or outside, it was either the stepdad at the time, whichever one my mom was married to, or just the stuff that they were doing and the people that they brought around and all that shady business, So there was, unfortunately, no shortage of people or things to be afraid of.
Yeah. How early did drugs stop being bad things and start being just part of the home?
Yeah, so I'll say, in my home environment, they weren't taught as bad things. So I don't remember a time in my childhood where it was bad. I just remember my first, exposure was, and I must have been younger than the 2nd grade, just based on where we lived in the school I was going to. Sifting through marijuana, pulling out seeds, so that my parents or my mom and her, her husband and and the neighbor just would sell it, right? And
Now, they couldn't be selling no shake, dude. They got to be selling good shit.
well, no, it was the Mexican brown, the old stuff, right before all this modern, where the seeds were still there. But I remember, picking out seeds, sorting it out, and putting it in bags,
Yeah, see, and you know what, man? When I listened to that, I mean, dude, I didn't have to do that type of shit, man.
Right.
So, dude, just hearing that, dude, that's hard. That is a pretty hardcore thing to be dropping on a first grader or a second grader.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
At the time, I'm just like, oh, I get a grape soda for doing this? Like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. The neighbor, and so it didn't, sadly, it didn't click for me at the time how ridiculous that was.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember, okay, I'll do this. I'll sort through this, whatever, and I get a soda,
And think about that, dude. It's like, we both have kids, man, dude. There's no way I'd put my kid in that position, dude. I would put my wife in that position or myself. But, you just think it's sad because, I don't know your mom, but I got to believe there was trauma in her past.
Sure.
And then what it becomes is this toll booth on the bridge. And what it does, it becomes this almost unbreakable cycle. And I
broke it, though.
I was going to say,
yeah,
you're the first person who's broken it.
Yeah.
I broke it in my family. And there's strength in that, bro. But, unfortunately, you got to go through a war zone to get to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you've said that domestic violence you saw was worse than almost anything you later saw as a cop. What made it cross that line? Because that's a bold statement, brother.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time on patrol. I spent half my career doing traffic and working investigations, but just in one particular stepdad, just stomping her head, and it's different to show up to a scene afterwards and take a report, right? But seeing it yourself or trying to intervene, being a kid, and stop your stepdad and getting, smacked down or beat down or whatever. But just even the injuries and not just the injuries that I saw, her suffering, but then the lies that came afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So
trying to justify it, trying to make excuses for him, or
just completely no, I walked into a wall. Or it's 2:00 in the morning and, we were doing construction and that's how my face is broken with a broken jaw, and that was hard because, I saw it, we saw it, my brother and my sister. I have a sister just a couple years younger, and seeing all of that and knowing what we knew to be fact, what we saw, and then her just changing, to cover for him, to keep him out of jail. Just the lying and the manipulating and you shut up and don't say anything to the police. But also just the injuries. I mean, the way that she would get beat on was,
she's lucky she ain't dead, bro. I mean, to be honest, man. It's like, somebody stomping your head. I don't know about you, man, but as a cop, dude, when I would show up to those scenes and a woman be beat to a pulp and then those guys would fight us, I would put those dudes down hard, dude. And I remember one time one of the guys goes, "Officer, why are you taking this shit so personal?" And I said, "Because I'm her avenging angel is what I am." And I'm like, and they'd be like, "Damn, dude." And I'd be like, "Yeah, dude, if you're going to be an asshole and beat on a woman where you're knocking teeth out and you're doing stuff like that, then guess what? Fight a man.
Right.
Don't be a bitch.
Yeah, go stomp on a woman that's half your size.
Yeah. The last time your stepdad put hands on your mom, you stepped in. What flipped the switch that night?
I don't know what flipped the switch. I just knew that
maybe you got a little bigger, a little older.
Yeah, I was probably, 13, 14 at the time. And I guess I had just had enough. And not just enough of watching it, but of being worried about what would happen. And so, I was not bigger than him for sure. But I stood up and I said, "You're not going to do that. You need to leave right now." And he headbutted me. He did.
Oh, shit.
He just head-butted me. And it was the first time I ever hit anybody with I hit him. You know, it was instinctive. And I hit him 2 or 3 times. He hit the ground, actually fell onto a coffee table and I'm like, wow, like, okay, well, I got hands too. And then my brother ran up and got a few licks in.
Okay, yeah. Hey, but you know what, though? There comes a point in time, and I think everybody gets it. Enough's enough.
Right.
Enough's enough. And and if she's not going to do it, then obviously there comes a point in time where you and your brother are like, hey, screw this. We're going to handle this shit.
Absolutely.
When you fought him, were you thinking about protecting her or just ending the situation?
Both. I was thinking about protecting her, but also making it clear to him I was never going to allow that to happen again.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's like,
I'm not going to watch you beat my mother anymore.
Yeah.
Ever again.
Yeah. Okay, you know what, dude? And God bless you, man.
Yeah.
Because that right there, I just think, I had to go into a lot of scenes, bro. And you just see what it does to kids, dude. And, man, and there were times, man, where, obviously I didn't care about the adults, man, but you look at the kids, bro, and you just see the devastation on their faces and how jacked up the situation is, man. And, I just think in my mind, I think God put me where I was supposed to be in some of those times because I didn't look at it like a lot of the VPD cops. I was different, dude. I didn't put up with that shit, not even 1 iota, dude.
Right.
Years later, you saw him again. This time, you've got a badge, and he's on parole. Be honest. What did you want to do to him at that moment?
well, I had already kicked his ass.
Yeah. But now you're a grown man.
Right.
Different.
Yes.
Different.
I was. And I was, I was hoping he would cross the line. I was hoping he'd give me a reason. Well, really, you asked me what I was hoping. I was hoping he'd take off running. I was hoping he'd start a fight so I could have kicked his ass.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He didn't give me that opportunity. And
he probably felt it too.
I'm sure. Yes. Oh, yes. It was, it went from, my childhood and, stepping all over us to, yes, sir. Well, no, he tried to be, super friendly and,
hey, how you been?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes,
dude.
yes.
Hey, that right there would have pissed me off already.
It did. And, I don't think I said it, but I was thinking, just give me a reason.
Yeah.
Just give me a reason, because that was, earlier when we fought, that was about one of the last times I had seen him. He went to jail and I moved out shortly after that when I was still a kid and I hadn't seen him in years. It sort of seemed like that was my moment to exact justice. And, he followed the rules. So I didn't have a reason to,
Yeah.
I was let down. I was like, I wish you had treated me right now the way that you treated my mother during all those years. And he didn't. But.
You know what, man? Different situation, but there was one time, man, me and my dad, we didn't talk for 20-something years. And we had a situation one time, and I grabbed him by his collar. And, and now I'm a little bigger than him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and me and my mom, dude, and my sister, we were living on welfare, living in bad neighborhoods, hand to mouth. He's a bail bondsman making hundreds of thousands of dollars. I found some tax records helping him move. I was like, Pop, you were making $300,000 in the 80s? And,
oh, wow.
And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, he's like, I never missed a payment of child support. He was giving my mom $150 a month for 2 kids.
Yeah.
Bro, before I could even stop myself, I grabbed him and I said, do not ever say that to me again. If you say that to me again, you will never fucking see me again.
Right.
And he was like, let me go, Jay. And he was like, listen, I'm trying to make it up to you. And I said, I know you are. But dude, the damage was done,
too late.
bro.
It was too late.
The damage is done, dude. When you found out how he died, did it feel like justice, tragedy, or just the inevitable of a long, sad story?
It felt inevitable, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was like, yeah, well, I mean, of course, that's how you'd go out, you know? It was.
Well, guys like that, dude, I mean, they have Born to Lose tattooed on them, man.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? They really do.
And I remember, you know, the cops showing up to get him for this, that, or the other, whatever, and hiding the addict or hiding, you know, we had, at one point we lived in a house where there was a crawl space underneath, you know, and he had the boards moved up, had a, you know, rug thrown over it, and, you know, he'd go hide when the police showed up. And I'm like, it was sort of the end. It was a, you know, it was certainly, you know, a forecasted end of his life. That's how he lived his life, being a criminal, you know, running from the law and absolutely giving nothing to anybody, you know, by way of, you know, civility, humanity. You know?
No, I get it. What does being really poor do to a kid's sense of dignity? Now, I live this, man, so I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think probably most of the, you know, the childhood, you know, bullying came from being poor, right? You know, and so even when the regular kids on welfare could make fun of us for being even poor, you know, you know, having a twin brother, you know, just switching clothes out, you know, whether it was not having a washer that worked or just not having any clothes, you know, switching clothes out and being called out, you know, wasn't your brother wearing that yesterday, you know, or, you know, white shirts that are supposed to be white that are pink or whatever the case is. But
did you guys go to Burton?
We went to Pioneer for
okay.
middle school. You know, on the east side, southeast side, but it was tough. You know, it created a hatred for being poor. It really did.
Dude,
you know?
You ain't a kidding, brother. I tell you something, man. I mean, I look back on those times, man, and, you know, we didn't have nothing. Mm-hmm. And I just think in my mind, I'm like, if somebody would have told me how I live now, dude, I might as well have been living on the moon, dude. It shocks me how far I've come. And I'm sure it does the same for you, because guess what? It wasn't easy, and nobody handed it to us. We had to work our asses off for it. But nonetheless, man, I mean, there's something about being poor. It really put a big chip on my shoulder, and it made me just work hard and go far and do things I could have never imagined.
Yeah, it did for me too. You know, I don't know what other kids, you know, daydream about, but, you know, for me, it was having a fridge with food in it, you know, or having clothes and being able to pay the bills. That's what I dreamt about, you know, as a kid. So it stuck with me, and it created that drive to never be poor.
Yeah. When you were sent out to collect cans so you could eat, did you feel shame or just hunger at that point?
You know, it was no shame, you know, because we wanted to eat, but anger, I guess, you know.
Well, because you're having to do that shit. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but it wasn't just, you know, it was go collect cans so we can eat, and then, you know, we get some food, but then I knew, okay, there's beer there, you know, or cigarettes. Yeah. And so, you know, going out collecting cans, or, you know, going to churches and asking for food, I was embarrassed about that. I was embarrassed to go to the church that I went to. My mom never went to it, you know, and asking for food, you know, that part was embarrassing, but collecting cans, I didn't care, you know. Yeah. I was out of the house and not having to, you know, deal with, and it was just, here, we're going to drop you off and go collect cans. It was actually it was a little bit of freedom, you know, but, yeah, it was unfortunate, but also, you know, it's one of those things where I understood the value of, I guess, hard work and, you know, and the value of being able to, or the appreciation of being able to feed my own kids without, you know, that sort of concern.
Big time. Watching food stamps get turned into booze and cigarettes. What lesson did that teach you about adults?
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, so the way it worked was here. I'm going to give you this dollar food stamp. Go get the cheapest piece of candy. So, like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm winning here. I'm getting candy. I didn't have a problem, and I didn't realize there was an issue, or I guess it didn't register that it was wrong until one time actually a store owner, I guess marked a quarter that he gave. He knew what was up. And he marked a quarter and gave it back as change. Mom came in and bought cigarettes. And the next time I went, he called me out. And man, I don't know. I probably was 10 at the time. But he chewed me out about, it was fraud and it was wrong and this, that, and the other. And all I knew was like, okay, I'm getting candy,
Yeah.
I'm getting a 5-cent piece of candy and I'm taking 95 cents back to my mom. I wasn't thinking about whether it was right or wrong. I was just like, hey, I'm getting candy. But, looking back, obviously I realized just how disgustingly ridiculous that is. And
I know. You know what, man? I remember when we would go to the store and my mom would pay for food with food stamps. And I hated it because, that is a true badge to show everybody
right,
you're poor. Right.
Well, at the time, they had the little paper ones.
Yeah. Remember the paper food? Yeah. But I remember one time my mom said, hey, this is how we eat, dude. She was like, so I don't want to hear it. And I was like, and to put it in perspective, later on in life, I realized my mom was just trying to make ends meet any way she knew how. Mm-hmm. Like, dude, we used to go stand in line for like government cheese.
Right.
That peanut butter. Remember, you could get like a jug of peanut butter that was like this big. And for the folks at home,
peanut butter,
I loved it, but I don't know what was in that peanut butter. But dude, if you ate it, dude, that shit would stop me up for like 3 days, dude. I mean, but that, and then, it's like, we didn't have to do that stuff as adults. I think our parents, at that point, they're just trying to do whatever they can to make ends meet. I think my mom was a little better at it because I wasn't dealing with drugs or stepfathers. Did you ever feel like the adults in their life were already gone, even while they were in the house with you?
Oh, for sure. In all of my childhood, my mom never showed up to anything, whether it was, I could have failed every class and never had, a stern talk. I didn't do any homework, I did well in school, but that's because of testing. But completely checked out. I was in choir, I did sports, I did orchestra. And there was no show through, no show up, whether it was my mom or my dad. My dad came to one concert. He lived out of town, but they checked out. I mean,
is your biological father still alive?
He is. Okay. Yeah, he is. He started a new family, moved to Arizona, but
okay.
I felt as a kid, I'm doing this on my own. They had completely checked out, and I could have either gone down a terrible path of not doing anything and being an idiot, and there would have been no follow through or whatever. But even the accolades, getting this award or that, perfect attendance. I went to school because they had food, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember getting the perfect attendance award every year and nobody showing up, nobody taking pictures. So they had checked out, really early.
Dude, I remember I was in Little League, 8, 9 years old, and they had a barbecue. Dude, I walked like 5 miles across Tulare at like 8 or 9 years old to get there.
Yeah.
Because my mom was like, we don't have no car.
Right.
Right. You want to get there? Get there.
Yeah.
Dude, there's no way I'd let my 9-year-old daughter walk across Visalia or Tulare where I grew up. And it's just like, I just think about those times and my mom was mentally checked out, but I just look at that and I just think, dude, how we're both still alive, especially you, is actually a miracle.
Yeah. Well, talking about checked out, I remember in SciCon, my brother and I went to SciCon at the same time. And nobody picked us up from school, we're there after school. And it, unfortunately, not having that support to drive sort of limited what I could do, it limited sports later on. But, you go to PsyCon in 6th grade. And I remember my brother and I walking home from the school with our stuff, not in a duffel bag, but in trash bags. And this lady on the side of this, we walk by a house and she's like, are you guys running away? And we're like, no, we're not running away. We're coming back from a field trip, Really? Your parents didn't pick you? No, they don't ever pick us up. We walk home all the time. But yeah, that's, on the flip side of that, when my kids went to PsyCon, I'm like, what can I get you? What do you guys need? Where's the list?
Yeah. Let's go get you a sleeping bag, all this other stuff.
Right?
Hey, dude, it's so funny, man. Me and my kid, we just talked about, my kid's 20, dude, but we talked about the day I picked her up from PsyCon. I'll never forget. And I was in my unit, bro, because I was in patrol.
Right.
Are you bothered by leg veins of any size, or is leg swelling or pain bugging you or someone you know? I would recommend that you make an appointment with our friends at Sequoia Vein and Wound to take care of it. With a friendly bilingual staff and their years of experience, they are happy to help resolve those issues. Give them a call to get a consult at 559-713-6478 and tell them that Jay Mac sent you. So I roll up and I'm like, hey, kid, how was PsyCon? My kid was like, it sucked. She's like, I hate it. But, you just think, man, our kids, we all want to give our kids better than we received. But I know this. My kid has got it 1,000 times easier than me. Well, I'm a master storyteller, so I got a story for you. All right. So I was recently teaching a class and criminal justice. And so there's a student right in the front, black. I talk for a while. I ask any questions. Hand shoots up. So I go, yes, sir. He goes, and he asked the $1 million question. Why do police officers shoot so many unarmed black men? And I said, well, let's discuss this. I go, does anybody in the room have a laptop computer? They go, yes. I go, fire it up. So they fire it up. And I go, let's go to the FBI website because let's pull up those stats. These are the stats that came up. Okay. Right now, there's about 348 million people in the United States, coast to coast. Normally, there's about 900 to a million police officers nationwide. That number is down right now. It's right about almost a little less than a lot of pundits will say this. It's less than 800,000. So we're down. Okay. Last year, for 2025, roughly 1,000 people were shot and killed by the police. Okay. So that represents 1/100th of 1%, 1/1000th of 1%. Okay. However, there were 111 police officers that were shot and killed last year. Okay. Now, there's other ones. Most cops die from traffic collisions, but there are some that were killed with a baseball bat. There were some that were killed with a tire iron, golf club. There's a lot of other factors, but we just concentrated firearm only. These are the statistics. Out of the 1,000 people, 46% were white, 25 were black, 17 were Hispanic, 2% Asian. There's about a 1 to 2% of Native American. And then there was a group of others, which is, I think, Middle Eastern, things of that nature.
Right.
Okay. So, questions start coming. So some of these students are like, well, why don't we hear that on the news? And I said, well, you got to remember, media. I go, this is what I said. I go, I respect the fact that you guys are in a college classroom trying to get yourselves educated. I go, but let me tell you what being educated truly is. Being educated is bringing on information and then making your own determination. I go, where we've lost that right now is the media is trying to tell you what to think. Right?
Right.
And I said, and that's where it gets dangerous.
Or emotional facts rather than statistical facts.
Yeah, and I said, All I'm going to give you is facts.
Mhm.
I said, because I go, here's what I love about facts. Facts don't lie. And I said, so with that being said, I just showed you that more white people get killed than blacks. I go, but we don't hear that, right? I go, I can tell you this. I pointed a gun at more than 500 people in my career. And most of them were Hispanic because I live in a town that is predominantly Hispanic. Tulare County is pushing about 60% Hispanic.
Right.
And I said, so listen, guys. I said, me and you, we grew up in the days of like Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather.
Right.
They didn't tell you what to think. They gave you the facts.
Yes.
Dude, I wouldn't lower myself to watch a CNN right now. I would not. I don't want people telling me what to think. And so with that being said, I tell this story, and this is what I would offer to people. I don't know everything, and I don't claim to know everything. But when it comes to law enforcement, I'm an expert at this. You're an expert at this. And so when people try to tell me stuff about law enforcement, I really try to hit them with facts, because I think that's what bridges the gap between people thinking that we're all out here doing nothing but bad versus what the numbers truly are.
Right. Which is tough for a lot of people, when they made up their mind and you challenge their belief of what the facts are, because that's what they saw on TV. Unfortunately, we live in a modern society where people don't want to be challenged. They don't want to, because it's harder for them to accept that they could be wrong than to accept the facts. And so that's tough. And I'll tell you, that's part of the reason that, I don't miss law enforcement so much, is because to deal with modern society where, it's easier to just take a 10-second, soundbite from the internet and make an assumption and draw your own conclusions than actually knowing the facts. That's tough. I mean, that's really tough.
And you know what I think the internet has done in a lot of ways? I love the fact it's given people information.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that I think a lot of departments are really trying to push transparency. However, you got people here that never worked a day in patrol that now just have self-elected themselves as an expert in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I would tell people, until it's you that is somebody trying to run you over with a car or coming at you with a baseball bat or a butcher knife, you are not an expert. I go, I'm an expert because I did this. I went to 100,000 calls for service.
Right.
I'm an expert. You are not. And I've had some people get like, well, I know what my eyes saw. And I'm like, but dude.
But did you know?
And I always tell people this, but think about this. You're sitting in your living room or your office watching this on a computer.
Hitting play and pause.
What about you? Well, I go, when you're there and somebody's trying to take your head off, you're going to take it personal, bro. And I go, I'm going to tell you this. I got into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fights. And dude, if people gave up, guess what? I put the cuffs on them and they didn't get hit.
Yeah.
But if you try to hit me, trust me, I was going to punch you back and I was going to hit you as hard as I could. And I was going to put you down and try to get in this as quickly as possible. But man, dude, I just think that we live in such a weird time. And I think a lot of people are being manipulated by the media. And that's scary,
It's really scary and concerning, disconcerting, even with where we're going as a society, where you're gonna not have any clue what's really going on, but I'm just gonna follow this social media person or this news cycle. I think it's made people lazy, unfortunately. They don't want to get their own facts. They're going to get opinions from other people.
Well, yeah. And they know this. I mean, if you rely on, especially, legacy media, if you rely on them, they're going to spin this narrative in any way any shape or form they want. And then people are just following this blindly.
Yeah.
And I used to tell people, it's like every time I'm teaching a class, especially to adults, I tell them, dude, bring the facts on. Do your own research. Don't take everything that you see on TV as fact, because it's not.
Right.
And that's scary. But I wanted to kind of drill down a little bit of this. Walk me through the moment that improvised explosive device went off. Where were you at that time? You said you weren't there.
Yeah, so my brother and I were over. It was on a weekend, and we were at a friend's house, and my sister called. That's how we knew, and said, somebody set a bomb off at her house. And
see, and you're the only person I know that I've ever heard that, dude.
Yeah. So, and at where we lived at the time, I don't know if you're really far south side of Porterville, south of Highway 198. But we were about, 2-3 miles away. So of course, me, my brother, myself, and our friend, of course, we got on our bikes and rode over there, like somebody blew up our house, we wanted to see. And also concerned, for my sister. And, as we're riding down this, country road, we see the lights, we see the flares, we see all the flashing. And as we get closer, we got drawn down on, there was a perimeter set up, and only time I ever got proned out at gunpoint. But that's obviously the police didn't know, and we're just showing up and, yelling, "Hey, I live here," and then, I think it must have been like 12, 13 at the time, 14 maybe at the oldest. We were also teenagers. So the idea that a teenager could have done something, I can understand that, but, it didn't sink in until I was older, that somebody could have been killed,
and big time.
And we walked in and saw the shrapnel and saw them pulling the nails out from inside the house that had gone through the exterior. And having not been there, I guess it didn't hit as home, but looking back, thinking that my sister could have been killed, or my mother, is just, it's rough to,
me and my wife were talking about it, and she actually came up with the question, was it because your parents had burned somebody in a drug dealer or a drug deal or something? I'm
going to guess yes. I didn't get answers when I was a kid, and, years later when I worked for the PT, I looked it up, and because I got no answers as a kid, had no clue why, but I knew that my parents were burning people. I mean, I had seen people come and, smack my stepdad around, and it was clear, that he had done something to anger these people that he dealt with. But at the time I just thought, this is crazy, but I was used to chaos. And so it was almost, I don't want to say it was normalized, but it didn't really hit me until later, years later. And probably actually while I was, writing, a personal essay to get into law school. And, one of the questions was, what is the three, what are your three, strongest or greatest memories? And I don't know what other people put, but that was one of them for me. And just, I put much more time thinking about it as an adult than I did as a kid. But that was just, it was case. And still to this day, I don't know. But I suspect, yes, that my stepdad or my mom had burned somebody and they were sending a message.
When nails punch through a house, does fear show up, or were you just, it sounds to me like you might have just been in shock, like, okay, yeah.
I had already spent years, literally laying in bed every night, wondering if somebody was going to come in and kill us. So,
because when they're living in that dope world, that could happen.
Right. Yeah. And so, sadly and ironically, nails going through a wall was not as scary as seeing people come in and beat up your stepdad or seeing the things that I did. So I was a bit desensitized to it, really.
Oh yeah. In fact, it goes right into my next one. What stuck with you more? The explosion or the fact that nobody even seemed surprised?
I guess that nobody, that was, at least in our home environment, what we knew, that was not that big of a deal. I don't remember, my mom or anybody saying, hey, you're going to be okay, we're going to be safe. None of that happened, If anything, I think I remember having to console my own mom, who had engaged in that lifestyle that brought that about. It was, that's, I think that was more of my focus at the time. I was desensitized to that violence, and that craziness.
And you know what, man, that's sad in itself, man.
It is.
At that point, did you believe anything like safety even existed?
No.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Like the idea, no. The concept of being safe and being able to have a child, no, that wasn't something that we knew.
Yeah. And you know what, man? I mean, and I'm sure, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm sure that's kind of what pushed you and your brother to go into what you guys ultimately did because, and I think it kind of did it for me in a way because I was like, you know what? I was born to be in service of others, man. And I think you were too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think because that's where that comes from, where you don't have that stable background like a lot of people. And then later on in life, you're like, I'm going to use my gifts and talents to help others. Right. And you know what's so weird is somebody recently, I ran into somebody that I went to high school with, and he said something to me and it really stuck with me, but he said, Jay, you've always been a leader. And at the time I was like, he's like, I always knew you would do something big. I was like, man, I'm glad you thought so. Cause back then drug dealer looked good, dude. You know what I mean? Because we're living in these crappy apartments, but I knew this, man, I wanted to do something with my life. And I'm sure all this bullshit that you were dealing with pushed you and your brother to go and do what you guys ultimately did.
Right. Well, of course it was, you can't help yourself and you spend your entire childhood being helpless and feeling helpless and unsafe. Then it created a drive to create that for others.
Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah. And, we'll get to it here in a sec, but when violence is normal, how early do you stop expecting protection? I'm sure you checked out with that long ago.
Yeah, I didn't, I never felt protected,
Yeah.
And even when it happened, whether it was what we were exposed to, regardless of the source of the violence or the danger, you don't have a parent that steps in. And I guess, maybe it was towards when I was in high school later on, my grandparents actually moved from Southern California up and, they didn't say this, but I knew, later I understood it, that they were giving us that lifeline,
So like come to our place. And
yeah. And had that not happened, maybe we would have both gone down the wrong path, but seeing that it didn't have to be that way, was inspiring and sort of gave us the hope I think that we needed so that we didn't fall into that. Because unfortunately, so many kids fall into the same sort of cycles or bad behaviors of their parents. But seeing that exception.
Was this your mom's parents?
Paternal.
Okay. Oh yeah, your
my
dad's.
father's parents.
Okay.
And so while he had checked out, my grandmother, who really came on to be, my greatest role model, I have no doubt they left what they knew behind, and they had just retired. And I think, they saved my life. They saved our lives in the sense of, I knew that they left everything that they knew behind. And even though we didn't get to see him too much, generally just on the weekends, but my grandparents started being involved and going to those school events that my parents never did. That was sort of what we needed, the lifeline that we needed, and really what actually, prevented us from falling into, that cycle or those cycles that we had grown up in.
Awesome, man. When the police showed up at your house as a kid, what did you expect from them?
Early on,
not much.
Well, early on from watching TV, we had high hopes. And it was, I mean, most of the time they were there was for domestic violence. And, you know, I had hoped, you know, okay, they're going to, you know, take the bad guy to jail. And when I, you know, came to realize is that he generally went to jail because they found a reason to violate his parole.
Yeah.
You know, but unfortunately, I also had a bad experience. You know, I had you know, because I didn't know. I was a kid, right? And so, like, I remember specifically where the incident where I finally fought back. You know, and I remember, you know, he'd always, it was the same cycle: domestic violence, rip the phones out of line, you know, run to the neighbor's house, running to, you know, I one time ran and ended up being like 2 miles to a store. And he chased me down, you know, my stepdad. You know, I went into a bar, ran into a bar, and, you know, some lady, you know, okay, I'll protect you. But what I saw a lot is indifference, what I thought was indifference from the police, because they never interviewed us. You know, they never asked the questions. And I came, you know, I later realized that was probably actually the best choice, because had they interviewed us, had they put us in that position to make that claim, we would have just gotten punished, right? He would have gotten out, and the beating would have been worse, right? But also, I didn't know at the time, I was a kid. You know, without her, my mom, testifying and giving a statement, you know, there's not a crime that they can prosecute.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that as a kid. And what I saw that, and I was really let down, because I thought, these are the people that are supposed to protect us. They're not asking us any questions. You know, she's giving some bullshit story that she ran into a wall or she tripped or whatever. And they're taking him to jail. But I knew that they were taking him to jail because it was on parole, you know? And so it felt, you know, I felt let down, but that was my, you know, I was naive. I didn't know at the time that there was probably a little more to it than that.
Yeah, you know, man, I mean, we were cops after OJ, and then, you know, that's when now, you know, hey, now the state of California can press charges. But back in those days, it wasn't like that. So if she didn't press charges, that was that.
And she wouldn't. Yeah. And she never did. Yeah. Well, but even if, you know, even now the state can prosecute if you don't have a cooperating witness, you know, and she wasn't, you know, her face would be bashed in with a broken nose, but her story to the police would be, I tripped and fell. You know, she never told the truth about what was going on.
For the folks at home, yeah, domestic violence is probably one of the hardest cases to investigate because victims normally recant.
Yeah.
You know, I would talk to the detectives at Visalia that were just specifically assigned to DV. All of them were so frustrated because a lot of those cases, dude, I mean, you know, they're pulling 911 tapes. They're trying to get statements from everybody else. And then if the Vic digs in and says this, I am not testifying, I am not going to cooperate, dude, it kills an investigation quicker than anything.
You have no proof.
Yeah.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah. What did it feel like when nothing really changed afterwards?
Felt hopeless.
Oh, yeah.
It felt hopeless. It really did. You know?
Yeah.
Same thing over and over again. It felt hopeless.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it was depressing.
I mean, dude. Well, who wouldn't after a while? You're like, hey, the cops are here all the time.
Yeah.
Nothing's happening. What the hell's going on here?
Right. Yeah. I was a depressed kid. I really was. And, you know, I mean, you can't have any self-esteem. I had nothing, you know, it was you rough.
Guys probably both could have benefited from some time on the couch back then with a psychologist.
Sure.
You know
sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, because really, you're just living in perpetual trauma, bro.
In chaos.
Yes. And, you know, and you think, that's just not healthy. I mean, and it's a real testament to you where you're at now in life, dude, because I just think, man, that you're on that razor's edge where I think this would have destroyed a lot of people.
Yeah, you know, and I'm not saying it didn't, you know, you know, my sense of what a normal family is supposed to be, or a normal, you know, I got none of that, you know. I had to read books, you know, raising my own kids. I can't compare I certainly can't. And unfortunately so many parents do, you know, resort to how they were taught. But I know that doesn't work. So reading basic parenting books and skills or doing therapy as an adult to learn how to appropriately address those things. But it really, a lot of people, to your question, a lot of people do fall into that. I think the biggest, downside is, it robbed us of our childhood,
Well, and I would say this. Have you watched the show Landman?
The first season.
Okay. Well, on this season,
they're on 3, right? Again,
it's second.
Okay.
It's the second one just had their season finale, but there's an episode where Billy Bob and his son are in this truck and they're driving, and Billy Bob said something and it really, really resonated with me. But this is what he said in a nutshell. He said, the problem with trauma of kids growing up is they tend to bring it into when they become adults. And what happens is that trauma just keeps getting recycled and recycled and recycled. And he goes, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Very seldom.
Right.
I would tell you this, I'm the one that snapped my trajectory of poverty. I've done that. I was able to give my daughter a pickup. My mom couldn't have done that, dude. We wouldn't be able to eat.
Right.
Yeah. And, but I look at that, man, as I was watching that Landman episode, I was like, man, it's so true. It is so true.
And the science shows that. So, a lot of our, and I work in family law, so I know this, but it's so prevalent that children that grow up in those homes are more likely to become victims or abusers themselves, that the law, that separates children and takes them out of homes where domestic violence is occurring is based on that science. So there's such a strong correlation between children that grow up witnessing that. Because we learn, all of us human beings, how to deal with problems and stress, from how we see that as children. And so it creates an unfortunate cycle, and it's not just TV and it's evidence-based. And so, and to get out of that, you have to really recognize and know to your bone that is wrong and it's inappropriate, and then get help.
Well, and I would think about this, man. Your law enforcement career, my law enforcement career. Think about all the people we dealt with. Most of these people are dealing with sexual assault victims, alcoholism, drug addiction, mental health issues, and a lot of times all things wrapped up in the same person, bro.
Right, yeah.
And, there's a reason that there's so many people that are pissed off, disillusioned, burned out, all this stuff. And you just look, and it's like a lot of times I would look at these people and you could literally see it like, these people don't even have a chance. And it's sad because, and then there's something about poverty. I think poverty invites that stuff. I think the only thing that protected me is, my dad was married 9 times. My mom never remarried after my dad. I think my mom hated men.
Yeah.
And so guess what? Me and my sister, I didn't have to deal with stepdads and bullshit and all that because my mom was like, I don't want no man in this house.
Right.
And at the time, you thought the cops didn't care. Do you still feel that way?
Well, there's probably some, but no, looking back, and I can tell you one specific guy, and, I have several stories about this guy, have a ton of love and respect for him. And as adults, we became not just friends, but really close friends. But Gary Miller, I don't know if you ever knew him.
Was he a cop in Porterville?
Yes, okay. Big Southern guy, from Louisiana. And he was one of the cops there. And I remember asking him, during that incident, and I said, why are you not taking my statement? And it was the only time I had ever really spoken up. And I said, he hit me. I'm a minor. Can't you arrest him for hitting a minor? And he said, you beat his ass. I think he's going to jail. And he says, are you going to come to court and testify against him? And if you do, what's going to happen to you when that happens.
There's going to be consequences.
Right. And so that's, it took a while for that to click for me. But I do feel differently. Everybody goes into law enforcement for a different reason, but I certainly believe with the guys that I worked with, men and women, that at least most of them have the purest of intentions. And so my position has changed, of course.
Yeah.
And then I did it myself. For years. And so I don't hold that same position now. I certainly don't, but I was a kid at the time.
No, I totally, when I was a little kid, I did not like cops, right? Yeah. I grew up in Tulare, man, and I grew up in a time back then, man, everybody and their mama kind of knew Tulare PD will kick your ass, right? But, later on in life, you really realize, man, dude, Tulare's a tough city to police. Visalia's a tough city.
Yeah.
Porterville's a tough city. What moment made you decide, if this is the best we get, I'll do it myself?
Well, that moment.
Okay,
so
that was it.
It was that. And so, I didn't realize at the time, his words didn't sink in. But my response at that time was, okay, if you're not going to do it, I'm going, instead of sitting here and complaining and being a victim, you know what, I'm going to do that job and I'm going to do it better than you.
Yeah.
And it was that incident where I finally stood up to him. And then that happened, that he ended up going to jail, but again, not because he headbutted me, not because of, they violated his parole or his parole officer did. But it was that incident where I'm like, okay. So I'm going to do that job. And I was wrong because, I was thinking about it like a child and just very, not even in the app. I was just looking at what I saw and, I didn't look at all the moving pieces. But that's the moment when I decided, instead of just being a victim and, I'm going to do the job and I'm going to do it better.
Yeah.
And I think I told him. I told him that.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what, man? And when I got out of the military, man, I was like, I'm going into law enforcement. And unfortunately, it took me 2 years to make that happen, man, because I got a lot of doors slammed in my face, man. But once I finally got in there and became a cop, I was like you, brother. I just did it better than most,
I tried. Yeah.
Did becoming a cop start as hope or anger?
A little of both, I guess, mostly hope that I could, help others that, were either going through what I was going through or to prevent them from having to go through what I did. I also saw it sort of as a, the flip side of the coin of what I dealt with. You're going to be crooks. I'm going to be the guy that puts people like you away. And you being my parents and the people they associated with. So, which I guess leans more towards the anger. There was a bitterness. There was an anger towards being poor and being criminal and saying, we don't care. We're just going to do whatever we want, despite how it affects people or who it hurts. So it was a little bit of an incentive. It was fuel to make change, not just talk about it, but to make it happen.
Man, I remember I was out on a DV one time and this lady she got beat up really bad. And I'm sitting there talking to her and we hear this Harley pull up and she goes, "Oh no, he's here. He's going to get us."
And I'm terrified, right?
And I go, "He's not going to do nothing with me standing here." And she goes, "I don't know, officer. He's scary." Dude, he walked in there and he's like, "Get out of my house." And I was like, you did you do that to her? Yeah. I go, "Do it to me." And he was like, "I don't want to fight, officer." I go, "Problem is I do."
Yeah.
Right.
And he was a coward, right?
Yeah.
Just beating on women.
Yeah. And so then now I put him in that position. So now he tries to attack me. I end up putting his head through a grandfather clock. But what I tell people is this. I didn't want to show up and attack people. That's not why I got in this job. But men who beat women like that, they're cowards. And I would tell you something. I saw, here's the problem with what we did, dude. We saw the finality of so many lives to senseless violence,
And-
just senseless.
And even deaths.
Yes.
The literal
time.
finality. Yeah.
Big time. And, how many times do we see a woman beat so badly and then, months down the road, we show back up and now she's been stabbed or shot or strangled to death or something along those lines, and it's just this vicious cycle, bro. And it's sad. And, it's like, I love the fact that, I live in a very peaceful home and, it's like, I don't have to deal with that stuff. And, I hope to God that my daughter never has to deal with that stuff. Because man, dude, it's just, I think once it takes hold in residences, I don't think it ever leaves. And in fact, every time I saw it, it always seems like it just ramped up each call. Each time we went back, it just got worse and worse and worse progressively until somebody was seriously injured.
Right.
You know what I mean? Did you ever worry you'd become just another uniform kids would be disappointed by?
Not so much. And I guess actually to my detriment, because I think I tried so hard to not be that disappointment. When I put the uniform on years later, I think I overcompensated. I think, to a large degree, I overdid it. I tried so hard to not let them down that, or not be be perceived as how I saw police officers that, to my own detriment and early on in my career, I think that was so much of my focus.
Bro, me and you are right here in that. I gave people so much of me because I wanted to do such a good job.
Right. And be the difference.
And here's the problem. Who takes the back seat? Our families take a back seat.
And you leave that behind. You leave that part of you behind.
You do. And I will tell you something, man. Being a good cop did a lot of good stuff for me, but I also know this. It did a lot of damage too. And I'm now 55 years old, dude. So I've had 5 years to kind of chill out. But man, bro, there were some years, man, that, I was a bear to be around, man, because, we're dealing with all that trauma on your days off. All you want to do is sleep. And, then, it's like, and then, what are we doing? We're all out drinking beer and chasing women and doing all this other shit that we shouldn't be doing. And I look back on those times, man, and man, I got the benefit of watching a lot of cops do stuff where I learned what not to do by watching them. Right. And you left home at 17. Were you just ready, or were you just finally just done with that shit?
Done.
Yeah. Did your brother go with you?
Yeah.
Okay. What scared you more? Was it staying or was it leaving?
It was, leaving and being out on your own,
Yeah.
But,
Where'd you guys go? You went and got an apartment, or what'd you guys do?
So initially we moved in with our grandmother.
Okay.
And then, we actually, at one point we were still, I guess it was maybe right after we moved in. My brother had a girlfriend. So he was working, I was working. He started dating a girl that was a couple years older than him. And so I remember 18 years old, the three of us sharing an apartment,
Okay.
That was freedom. But I also remember being like, who's going to sign my, school documents?
Yeah.
And so, it was more liberating. I the scary part wasn't so bad,
Yeah. How much did your brother keep you alive during that time?
All 100%. So, we had a sister, we have a sister, and she's great, a couple years younger, but being identical twins, we always felt like we were part of the team, and the three of us did, but especially he and I, we shared the same dad, and the same paternal family, and, feeling a part of that team, it was part of my identity. And so, 100% feeling that I had to keep doing it for him. And I'm sure he felt the same way, for me.
Who was more level-headed between you and him?
Me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was more talkative, more social, funnier. I was more of a sit back, listen, think, pay attention.
See, I've got to talk to you a whole lot more than I ever did him.
Yeah.
I mean, I met him a few times. But yeah, he always seemed kind of happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
Right. And like every time I talk to you, yeah, you seem obviously measured, level-headed, focused, driven. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why the Reserve Academy? Was it opportunity or desperation? I've asked some other guys that were like, man, they're like, I was desperate, dude. I was just to get my foot in the door. Dude,
it was actually an accident. So I and not paying attention during the counseling process at college, but so it was 18, finished high school, and I told my counselor I wanted to go to law enforcement. I also said I want to get a degree so that I can promote quicker, and I don't remember exactly why at the time that I didn't look at my schedule and see. And then when I did before, it started, it didn't click for me that it was actually the police academy. So when I showed up, I was thinking that I was still there to get a degree because I understood that I was only 18. And, generally speaking, most agencies wanted to hire closer to 21, at 21 because so you can carry the pistol. And so it was a shock for me because I'm like, oh, I'm actually in the police academy. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll just follow this through. But it was a little bit of a mistake on the part of, or miscommunication between me and my college.
Who was running that academy over there then?
So it was Kunkel.
Okay. Yeah, Gary.
And then Tim Brown, was a big part of it. Ludwig. I don't remember his first name from the
Tim
SO.
Brown, really nice guy, huh?
No, not even a little bit.
I was going to say, for the folks at home,
not even a little bit.
And even if Tim hears this, I'll just say it. Tim was intense and he was scary. Dude, he taught at my academy, and, then years later, I worked with him for a short time at Visalia. Then that's when he went over to Lindsay, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But, yeah, he carried it serious, brother.
Dude. I remember.
Serious,
yeah,
dude.
I remember one time we were sitting at a briefing, and I think this really illustrates who he is, and sort of an old school mentality that I just can't get behind. But, it was a briefing, and he said something like, what are you going to do this shift? And I said, go arrest bad guys. And he said, I want you to count the bricks in the bay. In Lindsay PD, they have that bay. And, I thought he was being funny. I thought he was making a joke. And I said, well, I think I could probably find something better to do with my time than counting bricks. And he just lit me up. Just how dare I question? And it was a ridiculous request, right?
That's a big time ridiculous.
Yeah. And he lit me up, and not only, and I said it just like that. Like, I thought he was joking, like, I'd rather go arrest people than count bricks just to, I guess, bow to the lieutenant. And he lit me up so bad. It was, I want a written memo exactly how many bricks there are. And I did. Yes, I actually did. I counted the bricks, and then, I sent an email out to others. I said, if you ever get asked to count bricks, let me tell you how many bricks there are.
412 bricks out there.
1,756
Oh,
bricks.
Jesus. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Did the academy feel like structure, or was it just another test?
The Reserve Academy felt like in Porterville. I mean, and not to say anything. Bill Henry, sorry, that's who officially ran at the time.
Okay.
He was retired from Bakersfield PD. He was the official director. But so the Reserve Academy felt like part of the process.
Yeah.
Later I finished the academy at COS, and it was structured,
Yeah.
But I came on to a group and actually joined up with my brother, in the extended academy, and that was different. I was working Monday through Friday and then going to law school, or not law school, but the academy Friday through Sunday.
What year did you guys go to the academy?
So I started the Reserve in 2002. And so then I think COS, we were in the 103rd class. I think we graduated maybe in 2004.
Okay. Yeah, see, I was class 84, dude. Dude, that was 97, dude.
Yeah.
We still had light bars with covered wagons with light bars on them. As an explorer, you were thrown into real violence early. Did that harden you really fast?
It did. I'll tell you, and some of the more exciting things I ever did in law enforcement was as an explorer, because I rode with guys that would do things that I wouldn't do.
Who did you ride with back then?
Ryan Hanks and Joe Hinojosa. Those were the two guys I rode with the most. They're hard chargers, and they helped, I guess, define who I was going to be as a police officer, a go-getter, proactive. I mean, you see the guys that go and they'll handle the calls for service. Those were guys that just crawled around looking for crime, sniffing it out. Ryan Hanks, we used to call him a shit magnet, because he'd just drive his car down and the criminals would just, find a way to just cross his path, and of course he had his eyes open. So, he didn't let him go.
You know what? I've always liked him, and you know what? I think it's really sad that he finally left Lindsay, because he's he's an Exeter now, and I think that's for them to lose somebody like him.
And he was there for a long time.
He was, a long time. And dude, when I was doing my student teaching at Lindsay High School, dude, he was in charge of like public works, dude, and it was like. They had him doing a lot of stuff, but I've always liked that dude. Fighting someone high on PCP, did you understand how close you were to actually getting killed?
I didn't, and so I was an explorer. He did the stop, and we did a traffic stop, and it was like right at the highway, and we ended up chasing this guy all the way to Tulare, and it was, it was not, so, he does a stop, the guy crashes. I think Tulare PD got there, and they're trying to pull him out of the car because he won't get out. Get him, they struggle and fight to get him cuffed, and I help with that aspect. But the part that really sticks out was that, they get him cuffed to a gurney. He gets transported to the hospital. Well, we're following the ambulance, and the ambulance stops. Immediately jerks to the side of the road. We knew there was trouble. Open up the back, and somehow, I don't know why this EMT would let him, because he was cuffed to the gurney. He got hands on this EMT, was choking this EMT out. And Ryan's using his asp to try to bend the guy's arms off away. And I saw the asp bending, against his forearm. And I'm just like, the level of just pain complaints, the lack of pain. And I'm like, I'm surprised the guy didn't have to get shot, because nothing, and I heard you talk about this with somebody, there's just no pain complaints whatsoever. They don't feel anything, with PCP.
Dude. Hey, we had 2 of them that we got to Sequoia Delta, and obviously it took 6 of us to, get them in cuffs.
Yeah.
Did we get over there? They flipped out so bad, the only thing that they could finally do is shoot the guy up with Haldol.
Yeah.
And knock him out.
Yeah.
And, and then we'd have to put him in a wheelchair, then get him to the unit, and then drive him out to Bob Wiley. And then we'd have to literally carry these guys into the jail. And I tell people that's the problem with John Q. Citizen doesn't realize about PCP.
Yeah.
The shit's dangerous. And,
to everybody.
And it does. And they flip out. They have ungodly strength, and they do not feel pain. It's a toxic trinity that just puts people. I mean, these guys they're scary.
Machines.
They are machines.
Machines without pain or feeling. Yeah.
You found an armed suspect hiding while officers search. Did that change how they looked at you?
I don't know, but it definitely changed my perspective to watch.
Yeah, because as an explorer, you don't have a gun on, man.
No, and because he was armed and he was armed with a rifle on foot, I stayed in the car. But I'm watching, the guys that I work, that I know and I ride with, walking around and just kind of going back and forth, and I'm sitting there bored, and so I'm hitting the spotlight, and I see in the corner of this property a tree, and I saw like the shadow move, after the spotlight stopped, and I'm like, I think he might be there, and the SO's screaming over, and so I didn't want to get on the radio, but at the same time, I'm like, I think he's there, and I remember officers walking within 10, 15 feet of this tree. And, I finally said, I gotta say something,
Complacency kills, bro.
Yeah. And so I got on the radio and I said, hey, I'm spotlighting that tree. I think there's somebody over there. And, I think it was Ryan at the time, turned around, and then within, 2 or 3 seconds, one at gunpoint, and they pulled him out. And I guess what I learned from that one was just how easy it could be to miss somebody that could kill you and end your life in a moment.
I've said this many times. We get a voice. The crook gets a voice. Murphy's Law gets a voice. Yeah. And if it can go bad, it will.
But dead people don't get a voice.
And you know what? And I mean, I've seen some cops do some dumb stuff, dude. And, and I would offer this. I used to tell dudes, especially when I was training a new cop, I'd be like, hey, bro, have your head on a swivel out here, man, because when it goes bad quick.
Yeah.
And when it goes bad quick, sometimes the margin of error is so small that, think about that. If they hadn't have seen him and you hadn't got on that radio, he could have stepped out with that rifle, picked a couple of them off, and been none the wiser, man. And they would have been none the wiser, and it could happen quick.
Or stayed hidden and then gotten away and then went and killed somebody else later.
100%. Yeah. You saw a car full of guns ready for a drive-by. Did it confirm what you already believed about the streets?
It did, and it was a scene straight out of a movie, where they actually had removed the center console. I don't know if it was like an old Camaro or something, and had rifles and pistols right there and covered with a towel.
Wow.
And
ready to roll.
Yeah. And I don't remember how we figured that they were getting ready to go do that drive-by. But I mean, they had all the stuff, they had the mask and all that good stuff. And, just loaded to the gill. And the idea that, maybe we saved a life,
I'm sure you did, because even if they went and did a 246, for the folks at home, that's shooting it into an inhabited dwelling.
Yeah.
How quickly, and what I used to hate about those, you see the little kid get hit.
Yeah.
Grandmother get hit, right? And you're like, the gangs, when they're shooting each other, we expect it. I used to hate to see the grandmother get hit, grandfather get hit, little kid get hit. You're just like, man, their crime was they're just in the house.
Right.
All right. And,
sleeping on their bed.
Correct. Correct.
Or even the house behind theirs. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People ain't got nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
They're getting hit.
Going.
Yeah. Why firefighting 2? Was it about service or in chasing the intensity, or did they not give you a choice?
I think that was a little bit of boredom. I think I was also trying. So at the time, and it's still the case, I think, Lindsay was technically not a police and fire department.
Yeah, they were public safety. Yeah.
And so I think I wanted to prove my worth, but also at that time I was the explorer. And so up until like a certain time, I think it was usually 10 p.m., the firemen, because there's not a whole lot of fires in Lindsay, would be our dispatchers on the city channel before we switched over to the sheriff's department dispatching us. And so I kind of grew close to them. And it was, at the time, well, he wasn't the chief at the time. He later became chief, Raymond Figueroa. His son was also getting ready to go into fire. And so I had seen him doing some ride-alongs, and it was about the same time that we did their little training thing together. And, I decided to be a reserve. And I also had like a distant cousin who was a fireman, and I knew everybody loves firemen, right?
Yeah.
They show up 10 minutes after the house is burned down, and everybody's still happy to see him. Cops show up a minute later.
I don't know if you saw Gino Garcia's episode, but dude, same thing. Dude, Gino's like, dude, when I had the firefighter uniform on, dude, people love me. I put on the cop one, they hate me.
We worked together for a period of time in Lindsay. Yeah.
See, he's my boy. I'm really tight with him. Did you feel most alive when things were going really bad? Because I did.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know about you. I wanted the car load where the 4 guys with the machine guns that didn't want to give up. That's the stuff that.
Well, the adrenaline. You're a cop.
Pumped.
You want to go save lives and put the bad guys away. Yeah. So I mean, that's where you felt most alive. Yeah.
Yes. When you finally became a full-time officer, did it feel earned or overdue?
Well, I guess overdue because I had already been an explorer and a reserve police officer. And so, the timing of when it happened was, I think, a little bit delayed.
Now, were you a full-time officer at Lindsay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then was your brother, was he already at Exeter or where was he?
He was at Exeter.
Exeter.
Yeah, he started in, I think he got his job, I want to say maybe like 4 months before I did.
Okay.
And we were both 21, like right at the edge. I think maybe he was right before 21 and I was maybe a month after I had turned 21. Yeah.
Got it. You arrested some of the same people over and over. Did that start to feel pointless?
Oh, it did. I got so bored, same guys over and over again. Because Lindsay, I was a hard charger.
Yeah, because Lindsay's small. There's only 12,000 people.
Yeah.
And they always say this, shitheads representing about 1%.
Right.
So you're just done with the same folks over and over.
And eventually they go to sleep. But I was, going through a whole shift. I mean, we'd go through a whole, during the wintertime, working, middle of the week, graveyards, we could go a whole 12-hour shift and not get a single call for service,
Jesus,
and it was, I was on the highway, I was creeping through town with no lights on, like just looking for some kind of action, looking for something to do, bored out of my mind.
If I tell you, we're on the flip, dude.
Yeah.
You're going to 35 calls a shift, dude. You're running and gunning, dude.
Yeah.
Did boredom ever scare you more than the danger?
I guess maybe in a sense that boredom was, there was a short period of time where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm not, I can go a whole shift and not, make any difference, not, take any bad guys to jail. So there was a period of time where I'm like, maybe this is not right for me, but I was in a city, that was small.
Yeah.
And I needed more to do. I needed more action.
What pulled you into DUI work?
It was a combination of 2 things, I guess. Maybe 3. How complicated the paperwork process is, really.
It's a lot of work
to do the DUI right, and I guess the lack of interest in some other officers in doing that. So I saw a need, feel a need, and then it was, I'm going to say it. There was an off-duty police officer that was, not from Lindsay, but we received a call, or my department did, for a potential DUI driver. And I didn't get this call. Joe Hinojos did. And seeing the regret in his eyes of not stopping that car and that vehicle before he crashed into a van and killed like 4 people.
Oh, shoot.
And just realizing that stopping that car before it crashes is absolutely imperative. But then also working those accidents on that curve right there on Highway 65, every one that I worked that was fatal was DUI related. And really tragically, more often than not, it wasn't the drunk that died.
It was the other people.
Yeah, because when they're drunk and they crash,
and family members, and
and they fall asleep, they're limber. And I learned this later, but the person headed to work at 4:00 in the morning was the one that would end up, with his head in the back seat, or it was, and realizing that is something absolutely preventable, and if you stop them, I recognized that you could probably save more lives by stopping a DUI, then you could, DUI, drunk drivers kill more people, generally or often than gang members. So while it's often something that gets overlooked or minimized, I saw that as a way to quantify the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
I might actually be saving lives. I might actually be helping.
And I would tell you something. You keyed on something. People don't realize John Q. Citizen has no concept. A DUI. Here's the problem. You got the report. You got the admin per se. You got the 310 form. Then you got the 180 because now you're towing the car.
Yeah.
So, and then you got to do the narrative. And then if we're doing breath, now you got the readouts.
Yeah.
If we're doing blood, now you got all that paperwork. So it's what I tell people. It's a lot of work for a misdemeanor crime, dude.
It is.
And so I used to tell people, a DUI is not what you think it is. People think it's just easy. It's not. It's going to suck your, bare minimum, it's going to suck you out for at least an hour or more.
Yeah.
You're going to be out of the rotation. But I do believe that it is important. And I'm like you. Your arrest numbers were impressive. Were you chasing impact, validation, or control?
Well, and that was in Porterville.
Yes.
So when I got those numbers, I'll tell you, it was both trying to make the biggest difference I could, but I also wanted to be the best in the state. So when I got the first, I had no idea what the numbers were. I had no idea what other officers were doing. But the first year I did it, I got invited to an awards ceremony, and it was the highest in the valley. They had like a 9-county thing. And when I beat out CHP, to me, I was like, okay, that's a win.
Yeah. Was the ceremony, was that put on by Matt or?
So I think all of them were.
Yeah.
But at different locations. But the first one I did, like I had the brass went and they were all excited and. But then I read, in some police officer magazine, the king of DUIs, the highest ranking guy was out of Orange County. And I'm like, I'm going to beat his numbers,
Yeah.
So there was a little bit also of like, this is what they're assigning me to do. So I'm going to be the best at it that I can. And I spent a lot of time self-teaching. I remember, if it was, I would work 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. If it was 3:30 a.m., I wasn't trying to arrest any more drunks because I knew it was a 2-hour thing, by the time you tow the car.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would go on defense attorney websites, that specialized in DUIs and looked at all the, if the officer did this and this and this, you have a case. So I would do the opposite, and I really became an expert, just learning myself, self-teaching, to get it down to a science.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be the best. Yeah.
I understand that. How many lives do you think you actually saved?
I don't know, man. If maybe 0, but if it was even 1, then it was worth it.
Damn right. Well, and I would tell you something, man.
And I did. Well, I'll tell you what. I had a reputation for Matt Green is working, Officer Green is working. And so if nothing else, I probably stopped more people from even getting into the car because I made sure that people knew. I would do bar checks and people knew who I was. They knew there was 0 tolerance. If you're a 0.09, the legal limit's 0.08, you were going to jail. It didn't matter whether you were a teacher, principal, fireman, cops. Everybody that I stopped that was under the influence went to jail. And so maybe if nothing else, I stopped people from getting in the car while they were drinking.
Love it. Did the job ever become about numbers instead of people?
Well, maybe with the DUIs, I was really trying those numbers.
You know what's so funny, man? I had 2 years on Mooney, and the cops on Mooney, a lot of these guys, they didn't do it. They didn't do much. They were just, respond. Dude, I went in those first couple of years, man, I hooked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people because I wanted everybody to know if you came to Mooney and you shoplifted, I was coming to get you.
Yeah.
And, but I realized then I was chasing numbers and, there's good in that, but there's bad in that as well.
Right.
And, when you applied for investigations, were you running towards something or away from burnout?
I spent, It was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I had actually wanted to work dope next, drugs. I wanted to, and I spent time, my arrest numbers were high enough that nobody, none of the admin messed with me. And so I would take, I would stop cars and I would, catch people with drugs. And I would try, which doesn't happen too often when you work patrol. I'd try to turn these guys, turn them into confidential informants. And I would get information. And I remember like sitting on houses, that I received information in a marked unit, doing a stakeout. And still getting those arrests, hearing this guy's selling. And so going and doing, getting him and getting consent to search and finding, the 8 balls wrapped in the center console that, and so I was a little bored doing the same thing over and over again, the monotony of dealing with drunks and cleaning up the urine or throw up in the back of my car.
Oh yeah.
So I was looking for, new challenges, new opportunities, and a change of scenery.
I would tell you something, man. About every 4 years, I was always looking for something new, and I think it helped my career.
Yeah,
because I think if you stay in something too long, I just see a lot of guys that get burnt, and so like every couple years, I got to do schools 8 years collectively in my career. 2 years here, 2 years there, 4 years there, and it was beneficial in my career, bro. And I just think too many guys, they get locked in, especially guys that try to do a 30-year career on patrol. I do not know how they do it. I could not.
I couldn't either.
What I didn't like about patrol, and I think Visalia, I hope they get better at this, but this is one of their down things, is when you're on patrol, dude, you're under that thumb, dude. Mm-hmm. And if you get a good supervisor, it's not too bad. You get a shitty one, that can be a long 3 months, brother.
Right, yeah, for sure.
So you went to crimes against women and children. How did you steel yourself for that? And I think you probably would have been the perfect guy to go into that because of your background.
Yeah, the crimes against women and children. Yeah. So there was a period of time where we separated, in our general investigations unit, and I'm not sure if I volunteered for that or if I had the lowest seniority.
Now, was it more, were you doing like more sex crimes or more DV or
so it was
child abuse? What?
So we did like all the suspected child abuse reports.
Got it.
We did, DVs that needed follow-up or, if there was, sexual assaults, sex crimes. And I think honestly, it was I was the low man on the totem pole, and that's how I got.
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah.
That's because I don't know if you think this, but I do. I think guys, and I've seen a couple of dudes that I know, they work sex crimes for too long. Dude, it jacked them up, bro.
It does, and the thing, and I don't hear anybody else talking about this. It wasn't just what you see. I'll tell you what really messed with me. Not just on the job, but even personally and the way that I view the world was the fake calls, the fake reports.
Dude, I brought this up and dude, me and my wife were having dinner one night and I said this to a group of people and people got pissed off at me, but I said, I'm a fucking expert at this.
Yeah.
But I said, I don't know if you guys know this, but a large portion of sex crimes are fabricated.
Yeah.
And I had a lady go, I can't believe you're saying that. I go, ma'am, I'm an expert at this. If I don't know, nobody knows. And I said, I'm not trying to diminish victims because I'm all about trying to fight hard for victims. But dude, a lot of this shit is fabricated, dude.
Whether it's the teenage girl that was out partying with her boyfriend all night and got caught, and then now I'm a victim, or a spouses that got caught. I remember one case where this lady reported just this crazy, rape thing, and we look into it and she's communicating with this guy on this app, telling him exactly what to do, like exactly what she reported. And the only reason it got reported is because her husband put a tracker on her car, found her at the hotel, and now she has to report this as a sex crime, and or the stepdaughter that gets told no, and not. by no means minimizing real victims.
Me neither.
But it is abuse. To say I was raped because, and which the most tragic part is that if you know that, you can't take an innocent person to jail, number one. Number two, it really hurts the real victims, because then there's that question,
Well, I used to get pissed off because it's a lot of work for us.
Right.
And like, hey, I don't mind working hard. I don't want any sexual pervert out here. I got a daughter. I got a wife. I don't want a sexual deviant out here.
Right.
However, I don't want to bust my ass on a case and then get to the end of it and feel like it was all fabricated. I used to get pissed off, dude.
Yeah. Well, you put your heart and your soul. You want to take, you see somebody that you think is a victim, and then you're like, I'm going to get the bad guy, right? And then you're hearing the story, and you're, and then, I'm not going to get too graphic, but, they report certain things, and this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. And then you go do the SART, the sexual assault response team, and none of those findings, where what they reported, there has to be physical findings, certain body parts don't go into certain body parts certain ways without there being physical evidence or trauma.
I totally agree.
And it would that part, I think, is the unspoken trauma of that. I mean, there's a lot, but that part was really hard too. Yeah.
No, it is. What call still wakes you up at night? Dude, I got about a half a dozen of them, bro. And I don't know what it is, but they hit me at the weirdest freaking times, dude.
I don't have too many now because I've been out for a while.
Yeah, I've been out for a minute.
I've been out for 10 years. No, I've been out for 14 years. And, none of them wake me up. But the ones that haunt me are the kids, the unsolved murder. Of all the homicides I worked, I had one that was unsolved. That one really sticks to me. And then, the child deaths or the child abuse cases. Those are the ones that, I look back on that, they don't wake me up in the middle of the night, but, and I'm always trying to look forward, not behind me. I try not to think too much about the past, which is probably a defense mechanism.
Yeah, no, 100% it is.
But, so they don't keep me up, but there are a number of cases that really stick with me and, that I'll always remember to the day I die.
Did any of those cases, did they change how you saw humanity?
Well, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, and that's tough to say because I didn't have a whole lot of hope in humanity, based on my childhood. But I went into law enforcement thinking I'm going to take the bad guy to jail, and working specifically sex crimes, or seeing, questioning, is the victim really the victim, or is the victim the suspect? It changed my view on humanity, and realizing that it's not so easy to determine who's a victim, who's a suspect, and also realizing that the people are willing to go through great lengths to lie, to lie, cheat, and steal, and how convincing that they could be. Taking a case and you're like, okay, this is a victim. I'm going to go get the bad guy. And then you get text messages, or you find out that person's not a victim at all, that you're being manipulated. It really did. I'll tell you what, maybe that was one of the hardest things about law enforcement, and really why, like specifically working sex crimes, you shouldn't do more than 3 years. Like you said, we had 3-year rotations there, but that can really suck the life out of you, Dude,
I tell you something. There's a guy in Tulare. He was a phenomenal sex crimes detective.
Brian?
Yes.
Yeah.
And dude,
he was good.
He was great.
Yeah.
But guess what? They would pull him out for a while and put him back in.
Yeah.
Pull him out for a while, put him back in. And and it's not healthy, bro.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? They're just, I think even now, it's like I've talked to sex crimes detectives, dude, and all of them, dude, I mean, that 2-3 years they're in there, you're working all those either rapes, or you're working a lot of those child molestation cases, they take it out of you. Mm-hmm. And I think we should not have people doing that for long periods of time. You wrote grants for ICAC, and for people at home, that's Internet Crimes Against Children. And you built that program. Did it feel like you were finally fixing something?
It did, because I saw a need. You know, I worked a case where we had I don't remember how it came about, but we found this guy with these images, and they were questionable age, you know, and they were not clear cut, you know, child pornography. But he had all these electronic devices, and I'm just looking at the physical pictures that he had all over his, you know, his motorhome. But then seeing that we didn't have a way to analyze those, and I knew that you couldn't just pop somebody's, you know, hard drive into your computer, you know, because I had enough knowledge to know that that was not a way to keep the evidence safe. And so I reached out. Brian Haney was my contact. He helped me do that, and it was through the DA's office. You know, I reached out to Phil Espenshade, who worked sex crimes, who prosecuted sex crimes, and he said, "Hey, hit up Brian Haney." And it was Brian Haney that said, you know, I went into his lab and, you know, he showed me how to do it. And I'm like, how do we not have anybody at this department that can do this, that can do any forensic analysis on any electronic device? Nothing, whether it was a homicide, you know, or certainly what I was doing, sex crimes. And so, you know, I asked.
Were you guys using like Celebrate and shit
well,
like
yeah,
that?
we had Cellbrite. The
yeah.
gang unit had Cellbrites to do that stuff. But, and I guess that would have worked, you know, because it's right block protected.
And for the folks at home real fast, Cellbrite is this, where they can plug your phone in and then they can rip everything off of that phone. And we can use that as evidence.
Yeah, downloads.
And not everybody knows how to do it.
Right.
And in fact, our people, like in our evidence text, they're the ones that are experts on it. But
okay,
it's a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
But we didn't have anybody. So I worked with Brian Haney. He helped me out with that case. And then, you know, I went to the admin and said, you know, this is what I want to do. And there's this organization, Homeland Security has this task force. So I joined the task force, and, you know, they said, well, if you're on the task force for a couple of years, you know, we'll get you the equipment. And I knew that was, you know, time was of the essence. So I wrote grants. I wrote a couple grants to get the funding, and I had never written a grant before, to get the funding to buy that equipment, and we did.
How much were those grants to do that?
I did 2 for $5,000 each, so $10,000.
Yeah, because you got to have computers.
The lab,
yeah. I can tell you something. I think the sheriff's office or something, but yeah, they even have a thing that gives them a heads up when somebody's downloading or
so
sending.
That's what I did.
Yeah,
the proactive stuff. So basically these file sharing, you know, we used to, when we were, you know, we'd get music, right? LimeWire, stuff like that. We'd download music and share it. Well, even LimeWire, which, you know, I used as a kid to get music and movies.
I did too.
Was used to distribute and exchange child pornography. So, you know, every image that goes online has a digital fingerprint. And so we had computer programs that would look for those fingerprints that were identified by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
You
know, and so I'd turn my computer on and it would start running and look, okay, so, you know, this IP, you know, this geographic area with these IP addresses, you know, I don't want to give too much away, but, you know, we could see IP addresses where they were sharing files that had already been identified as being child pornography.
I will tell you something, man. Do you remember a guy named Paul Geezer?
Yeah.
All right, so Paul Geezer was doing ICAC.
Yeah.
And he told me right before he got out of sex crimes, he said he got so good that he could look at an image and just by the serial number of it, he already knew what image that was. He didn't even have to look it up.
Yeah.
And he goes, that's when I knew it was time for me to get out.
Right. Because there's some of them that are really popular. And
they get shared by all these child molesters. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You used a recorder to get confessions. Did you struggle with the ethics or just the necessity? And I can't believe they gave you a hard time about that.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, it was, I just came up with it. So it was a child abuse case this lady, this kid had, broken ribs and femurs and just a number. His hair was missing. And I remember talking to the mom, and I had, you usually interview criminals in the back, right? The holding area. But I also knew the law. I knew that the minute they're back there, it's definitely they're in custody. Miranda applies. Nobody talks when you give them the Miranda rights. So I did really good at interviewing people without giving them their Miranda rights by making them feel like they were not in custody.
Yeah.
So I take them into the soft interview room, which is a room that we had where you would normally interview children. It was couches, paintings on the wall, stuffed animals. And I was talking to her, and I knew she did it, but I couldn't prove it because she's saying it wasn't me, it was my sister, so on and so forth. But the thing about this room is that it was video recorded. But I always doubled down on every recording. I always wanted more proof than was necessary. So I had my recording there, and I don't even know what caused me to think to do this. But I knew that, the light when it was, green, it was recording. When it was on but not recording, it was red. And so I just had a feeling like, let me try this. And so I picked up the recorder, stopped it, which was okay because I had the second recorder going in the room. And I said, see, what you said right now was a lie. What you don't know is that this device is a voice stress analyzer. And I had never seen a voice stress analyzer, but I knew that they existed. And I said, basically tell me to piss off or tell me the truth. Don't waste my time lying to me, And I said, so let's start all over. Why don't you tell me? And then, I hit it again and it turns green, and as soon as she started denying it again, I picked it up and hit it again and it turns red. And I said, no, see, you're lying, and I'm pretty sure it was that technique because she said, okay, yes, it was me. I was frustrated, and this was an interview that took hours, probably 2 hours. But she had admitted to, abusing this and it was terrible. You had, the bilateral hemorrhaging in the eyes, for the shaking, shaking a baby and spiral fracture and, from the twisting of the arms, which is not common. And, that was enough to get her to admit to it. And then later I used that again on a homicide, and my supervisor didn't, that technique worked. The district attorney's office, Phil Espenshade, loved it. He shared it in the in different.
I always say this: it's that whole thing, man. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, dude.
Right.
And so, dude. I learned a lot of techniques by watching cop shows. We used to watch The Wire, which I've put suspects' hands on a copy machine and already had it preloaded, and and said, right, and be like, so for the folks at home, I already have the 3 pieces of paper in the copy machine, would have no, yes, and it would be like this. All right, is your name Steven Johnson? Yes. I would hit copy and it would spit out yes. Then I would say, do you live at this address? Yes. All right. Are you guilty of this? They would be like, no. I'd hit that and it would spit out yes. I'd be like, you lying motherfucker, man. Right. And I couldn't believe how many guys would go like, all right, man, you got me. I did it.
I didn't do that one. I used the recorder, but it doesn't work on everybody.
It doesn't. Yeah. Well, obviously there are certain criminals that are brilliant.
Right. It's the lower IQ ones.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously,
who are just as dangerous. They're just as dangerous as the IQ ones.
When supervisors told you not to use that recorder and you did it anyways, were you risking your career?
I don't know if I was risking my career. What I knew about that case was that a kid had died. And what stuck with me is the doctor of LA Children's who said, no question, Kinnison, Dr. Kinnison. I remember his name. I remember all their names.
Sam.
And that, is it Sam was his first?
No.
His dad was a DA,
remember Sam Kinnison, he was a comedian. Yeah,
okay. Yeah. But he said if you get the perpetrator, sit down, you don't let him leave until you get a confession, which I don't follow doctors' orders, but I knew that we had no way to prove which parent did this. I knew it was one of two parents. And I had no way to distinguish that it was mom or dad. But I caught Dad in a lie. And it was such a silly lie, that there's no reason to make it up. It wasn't an accident. It was a very intentional lie and minute. And he probably didn't put too much thought into it. And so I had the doctor's head, his words in my head, don't let him go. And so, I talked to him, and, that was my longest, I hate to use the word interrogation, interview, but it was 4.5 hours long.
Oh, that's a long time.
And this guy, and I remember because I went to trial afterwards, he asked for an attorney or said, some variation of that like 13 times. And I said, you're not under arrest, man. I don't have an attorney to give you. If you have an attorney, you can certainly call. You're free to go. The door's not locked. You're not handcuffed. You can leave right now. But if we're talking, I'm going to keep talking, but I can't give you an attorney. If you're arrested tomorrow, you'll get an attorney, but right now, you don't have one. And, so I knew that there was nothing to lose. If we didn't get a confession from this guy, that this child was never going to see justice.
Yeah.
And so I was told, don't do it. And it's the only time that I ever disobeyed an order. And I didn't care. I was going to help investigate to the point where somebody was held accountable for this kid's death.
God bless you. What's worse, not catching them or knowing how many you'll never find?
Man, I don't know. But, I guess I hadn't thought about that. I don't think about the ones I won't find. I think about the ones that I couldn't catch,
Oh, yeah.
So, I worked, I don't know, maybe a dozen homicides or so, including that one with a child. But the only one that I ever worked where it went unsolved, that haunts me.
Yeah.
That person got no justice.
No, I get it.
That's one of those few cases that haunts me. And we had a pretty high success rate at getting arrests and convictions for homicide in Porterville, and but not that one. And that one stings.
Why SWAT? Was it control, brotherhood, or preparation for the worst?
I wanted to kick indoors.
Yeah.
No, it was a little bit of that. I also, I remember doing investigations, and we would, we get like search warrants, for somebody for attempted murder. And I remember one particular case, we did a search warrant, and we had a supervisor who didn't want us to boot the door. And this guy, it was a gang attempted murder. He had stabbed some guy up, and he just didn't want to write a report for booting the door. We knocked, nobody answered, and he sent. And I said, I'm not going to do this. He wanted us to jump through the window to open, to go. And I said, he didn't order me, because I guess that would have been the second time I disobeyed. But I said, I'm not a neighborhood kid breaking into a house. I am not going to climb through a window in a house that has been unsecured.
Yeah, get shot
Go
trying to
by
go through.
Yes,
go through a window.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
I'm not getting shot in the head for climbing through the window like a thug. Like, we have a search warrant for an attempted murder suspect.
Yeah, let's boot the door.
I'm not climbing through the window like I did, like I left my keys, and so I wanted that tactile, but it's the elite. I was I think I joined SWAT after, because we didn't have a full-time SWAT, so
that was
it was a secondary
duty,
And so when you're the detective, and then the SWAT guys get to go boot the door and get the but it was probably status. I wanted to be the guy, with the SWAT team. I wanted to shoot the AR-15s. I wanted to use the flashbangs. That was a cop, mentality. I wanted to do the exciting action stuff.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
How close did you really come to shooting somebody?
I had some cases where people, I fought with guys with guns. Had a guy that tried to take my gun. I think the closest I ever came to using deadly force was actually my pocket knife, and I was fighting with the guy over my gun. I tried really hard to stop the problem before it got there. I tried to de-escalate. If I went into a hot call where, I knew there was going to be drama, I tried to outthink the drama. I tried to, put, either the way I approach the situation to avoid that. There's some guys that's, they use a hammer, right, on a situation where, I might use finesse, and I talk people into cuffs. But I had some cases where, I fought with some guys with some guns, and that was close, but
I tell you something, man. I had 3 people in my career try to take my gun from me.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of them got hauled off in an ambulance. You know what I mean? And, man, because honestly, that's the scary part. Even when we would talk about when I would have a rookie and I would bring, I was training a new cop, I'd be like, remember this, every call we go to, there's a gun because we're wearing it. And, how easily do things go south really quick.
Right.
And, and I think too, and I know you saw this, there's some people I think that get into this type of work and they're almost too trusting.
Yeah.
And I had to tell a couple guys, you're a good dude, but you see the best in everybody and you can't do that.
Yeah. I'll tell you that had to be a shift for me. So I wanted to be the nice guy, based on my experience. And so when I was in Lindsay, I recognized that there were the same guys that would run from me would not run from the cops that had no chance actually catching them. But those guys knew that if they got caught, it was fisticuffs and they were leaving in an ambulance.
Yeah.
And so I had to make a very intentional shift in my mind when I switched to portable. I said, this is a different beast here. And so that's when I shaved my head, and it was a very concerted and conscious effort to be the hard ass, because I thought to myself, and the statistics will show this, the cops that are killed in the line of duty, they're the nice guys more often than not. They're not the ones out looking for trouble. They're not the ones, they're the ones that are perceived as weak. And so, that was tough for me because I wanted to, I wanted to be the nice guy. I wanted to be perceived as a good cop. And at the end of the day, I wanted to be an alive cop. I wanted to stay alive and not get killed because somebody perceived me as weak, because I'm trying to be respectful.
Yeah. I tell you something, I was not respectful a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you know what? And I was a hard ass, and, but it kept me alive, bro.
You're still here.
And I always said I want to treat everybody with dignity and respect, but I got a plan to kill everybody in the room if necessary. And that's what I think keeps cops alive. And
it is, yeah. And my mentality, I'm going to say, was probably a bit weak in the beginning, because I was trying to be nice, and you don't survive 30 years. I didn't do 30 years, but you don't survive doing that. And so I was a bit naive. I really was, and maybe too idealistic.
No, I you know what? And there were some guys when I would train guys. I mean, I've had to do this. They pull into this parking lot, bro, and I've had to tell some grown men, "You're a good dude, and I like you, but this job is not for you, dude.
Yeah.
You turn your back on suspects. You expose your gun side. You believe everybody." And I'm like, "Hey, bro, it's one thing to get yourself killed. It's a whole other thing get me killed
You're
too."
in danger, right?
Yeah. And I used to tell guys, not everybody's made to do this job. Walk me through the fight where the suspect tried to take your gun and you almost shanked him.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you, that one was tough. I had put and considering how many DUIs I had, arrests, how many drunks I had to deal with, I'm surprised that it went that long. I had guys run, pursuits, all that good stuff, but totally caught me off guard. This was, I'll remember just almost about every aspect of that, because that culminated to really me sort of a losing faith in the justice system. And I'll get towards, to that towards the end of the story, but, stopped, somebody, did the FST, standardized field sobriety test. And, he was drunk. And, dispatch had just asked me if I was good. I gave my code 4, all good. And tell the guy, turn around, put your hand. And I had already told him, okay, you're under arrest. I'm going to arrest you. But if you're cool, I'm going to cite you out. It's a misdemeanor. If you have somebody come sign for you who's sober, you're going to be out in 2 hours. And I tell him, turn around, put your hands behind your back. And I had just put my flashlight, in my back pocket, and started to grab my cuffs. And he just turned around and hit me, And he, I had lots of guys run. That's the only time anybody had decided to fight instead of run. And he hit me probably 2 or 3 times before I said, oh shit, I'm in a fight.
Yeah.
And my, the training all went out, And so I'm like, I start swinging back, right? And one of the first things that happens is my, your mic extender gets knocked off. And, and I'm going, well, the process of that, I think, is when dispatch sort of thought something was going on. So unfortunately, right after I did that, another officer that was on a stop decided to run like 4 people, and he didn't do the whole breaks.
Yeah.
But during I think the last person during the break, and I, this dispatcher was phenomenal. She knew, and you couldn't hear the focus. You could just hear the change in frequency when me trying to get on the radio instead of him. But you could hear the shuffle, but, we were doing just the back and forth. We did that for some period of time. He tried to take off running. I'd grab him, pull him down. At some point, we kind of broke through somebody's fence, in the struggle. Well, ended back up on the street on the front of my car. I'm still trying to fight this guy to get him in handcuffs. Well, at one point I'm, stepping back. I'm like, I'm going to get my ass out. I hated using pepper spray. It was worse on me than any guy.
It always works better on cops than it does on bad guys.
So that was not, a thing for me. And I was trying to get some distance so I could pull my ass out. And while I'm doing that, he hits me as I'm stepping back off the curb into a planter. So I lost my balance and fall backwards, hit my head. He just jumped on me. And I think this was before I'd ever seen a cage fight. But he did the full mount and just started,
wow.
And, I'm defending myself. It's wintertime, so I have a jacket. It doesn't, you can't move around too much. Well, I'm defending myself. I can't get my radio. And I'm thinking to myself, and I guess I'll give one, I didn't panic. My brain was still focusing. I was losing that fight. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, here's my options. I'm on the ground. I can't get my ass out to extend it to do that. And I'm trying to get him off me. And then I feel the tug of my gun. And I feel him start yanking on it. And, of course, he's still hitting me with one hand while he's grabbing my gun. And I remembered, and I said, let it go, or I will kill you. I said, let my gun go, or I will fucking kill you. And he's like, oh, try, Bob, and he's still hitting me. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm not going to pull this gun out because, we had the triple threat holster. And I'm like, it's probably safer in my holster. And I'm still in this fight, but I'm thinking to myself,
dude, I would have stabbed him right then and there, dude.
Well, but I was thinking, but I'm thinking, if he knocks me out, because at this point he could take off and run. He's not trying to run, and most of it was fight. And I remember thinking to myself, if he gets my gun, he's going to kill me. Yeah. He is. He's not going to take my gun to run home and put it up on his wall as a trophy. And then I said, it's either him or me. And I'm thinking this, and I'm like, well, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I didn't carry a leg piece, and so I thought all I have is my knife, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to step. And then I thought, how's that going to look? I remember thinking this. I'm getting smacked in the face, right? Yeah. Punched in the face.
You were overthinking it, bro.
And I'm thinking to myself, how's this going to look in the newspaper? Cops stab somebody. And so I'm like, okay, well, I won't go for the neck initially. Yeah. I'm going to jab him right in the side and see if that works. And right as I'm like, okay, I have no other option. I have, no other option. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stab him. And right as that was happening, I see something running out of the corner of my eye. My first thought was, oh shit.
Yeah, his
buddy's here.
Yeah.
I knew he lived right around. And I'm like, okay, it's probably too late, but it's all or nothing. And this guy actually knocked the guy off me. He came with such force that he knocked the guy several feet and they rolled. And I'm like, okay, I got up, I jumped on him, and I was spent. Later listening to the recording of when they heard static versus when the first unit got there, it was almost 5 minutes.
That's a long fight, bro.
It was for me. And I was spent. Adrenaline dumped, and I couldn't even get him cuffed. But I just held on to him. I held on to him in a chokehold. And first unit gets there, and it was John Hall. And, I still had the mindset because I'm like, he's okay, pointing at the guy that had helped. And we got him into custody. But I say I lost faith because he pled guilty to every count, 4 counts, felonies, including, trying to take my firearm. His only other arrests were just 2 weeks before that and 3 weeks before that for PC-69, fighting the police with injury and resisting arrest. He did this for sport. He was a personal trainer at the gym. I later found out that he did some fighting at the casino. I had no doubt he was doing it for sport. He was trying to kill me.
How much time did they give him?
Well, a year, which meant
What?
6 months, with good behavior. And I gave a victim impact statement, and I said, he would have killed me. I said, he's still alive because I didn't kill him. He tried to kill me.
I will tell you something. See, man, when I got in those, I got mad dog mean. I'd have killed him.
Yeah.
And,
I was ready to stab him.
The moment, wait, I kind of went through all this. What finally convinced you that policing was not for you anymore?
It was SWAT training. There was a number of things. I felt I was smart, and
you are. You're wicked smart.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's not always appreciated in law enforcement. To some degree, I can understand. You have policies, you have procedures, and you have the way things are done, right? But I got a lot of pushback for trying to, do things differently or innovate. And in particular, and I had been close ties, working investigations, working big cases with the district attorney's office. I had a prosecutor I was really fond of, telling me I should go to law school. But it was actually sitting at SWAT training one day, and it was being led by somebody who had never gone to SWAT training, who had never been on the SWAT team.
That is not good.
No, but he was a sergeant, and he didn't last too long, on the SWAT team. I think maybe 2 months or 3 months. But he was coming up with, we were doing SWAT training, and it was on how to assault a bus, right? How we're going to deal with a hostage situation on a bus. And ironically, we had done this training. We had done this training like 8 months before as a team, with a different supervisor. And then we coincidentally also did like a valley-wide SWAT training with all the other SWAT teams, including the FBI's HRT team. And we got to pick like 4 trainings. We also did, a bus assault.
Well, as far as domestic, nobody's going to do it better than HRT.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're trained.
A lot of those guys are like former SEAL Team 6
and
dudes.
They do that every day.
Yeah.
Every single day. And he was just spitballing this. And
you can't bullshit cops. We know when it's bullshit.
Right.
Yeah.
And I challenged him. I said, so I have a question. We did this 8 months ago. This is how we did it then. We just trained with the FBI's HRT team. We did it this way. And it seems like you're coming up with a new way. And he had a really, I'm going to say, ignorant and smart-ass response, which is you got to be ready for everything. And he's not wrong. But He is wrong in the sense that when you're doing training, you should train for a best case scenario, okay? We don't want to let the bad guys define. And unfortunately, a lot of times it does. But I felt we should go into every scenario with this is an ideal way to deal with this. It's Porterville or it's a hostage rescue on a bus. I mean, there's only so many different ways.
Well, they always say a bus and a plane are two of the worst things to assault.
Right.
Because they all got big windows. They can see it coming.
Yeah.
And, it's hard. Plus, God forbid, it's loaded down with passengers.
Right. Hostages, shields.
Then you just got, you got human shields. You got a lot of collateral damage that could happen. It's a rough gig. And you're right, man. If I always say this, I used to tell guys like that supervisor, let's not reinvent the wheel, bro.
Yeah,
right.
Well, which is ironic because, they were so against intellect and coming up with something new. And yet, when I say, hey, we should have a best case scenario, and it was just really dismissive. And I thought to myself, I'm sitting there sweating, with all that gear on, doing a bus assault for completely, and he's literally making up as he goes along. And I thought to myself, this guy could not pass a high school exit exam. He's here because he drinks with the chief. And this is the guy that's going to send me into a house when shit gets really bad. And so all of that came to me, and I said, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm going to go to law school where my intellect is appreciated and not ridiculed or mocked, or minimized.
Was leaving harder than staying?
No, it wasn't, and I loved that job, and I miss it in the sense of I miss the service, I miss the camaraderie, the public service. I really do miss, but I don't, what I don't miss, and maybe if I had worked, and I'm not to disparage anybody at that department, but if I had worked for a department where intellect or innovation was considered, or where people were promoted based on merit as opposed to, so-and-so has dirt on so-and-so.
I would tell you something, dude. You should have went to the highway patrol. I think you fit into that mold. Meritocracy is important. And I think that we have gotten to a point in law enforcement where oftentimes that goes out the window.
Yeah.
And how did law school change the way you judged cops, including yourself?
I don't know that it changed a whole lot. I guess what I would say, maybe, I viewed it, I struggled a bit. So, when you're charged with and required to take a set of facts and make a decision, I have probable cause to make this arrest. You sort of have to view things as black and white. But I struggled in law school because, we would be given a set of facts and have to argue from two completely different viewpoints. I was used to reading a set of facts or investigating a set of facts and then drawing a conclusion where, that wasn't what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to look at a set of facts and be able to argue any side of it. And so I don't know that I viewed, law enforcement any differently. Certainly when I was taking my criminal procedure, criminal law classes, everybody looked to me, for my advice or experience. Or, I struggled because even though I went to law school here in the Valley, we had some really far left-leaning people, where anytime anything on the, media came up, during that period of time, it was, well, why did this cop do this? Well, I don't know. I don't know the facts. I mean, you're telling me the facts from what the TV, the media is reporting. So I don't know that it changed my viewpoint. I still admire, those in law enforcement still with the audacity to keep doing it, especially in this day and age where it's so hard, and where there's just so little, appreciation or respect for those that put their uniform on.
No, 100%. I tell you something, man. You just said something, and it just like a bolt of lightning. Getting my master's, all my mentor teachers, all the people in education I was dealing with, all of them far left.
Yeah, they want to indoctrinate.
And I will tell you something. I did not jive with that. And, by the end of it, I remember telling myself, this is not where you belong, Jay. I'm proud of myself that I got the master's. I'm proud of myself that I got the credential, but I don't want nothing to do with it, man. And that's hard for me to have to admit, bro.
Right.
Did you start seeing how broken the system truly is?
Which system?
The criminal justice system, because I think it's a good system. However, I think it's very flawed.
It is, but it is. But when you look at other systems in other countries, and this is, I'm not, inventing this phrase. I still think we have the best system there is.
I do too.
Is it broken? Sure. I think it's even more broken now than it was when I was in law enforcement. But I even that being said, I still think we have the best system. Well, and I always had a love for the law, and here's why. Because the law is supposed to be what makes us equal. It's the great equalizer. When I left law enforcement, I had guys saying, "Oh, you're going to be a defense." I don't want it. No. I had an appreciation and respect for the law and the Constitution because that's what's supposed to make us all equal. Now, it's not always applied equally and or even correctly, but I still think we have the best legal system.
I do too. It just, I got kind of disillusioned really at the end of my career because stuff that should get filed doesn't.
Oh, right. Of course.
Stuff that should never get filed does. People that should go to prison for lengthy sentences don't. And you start to see the cracks in the system. Yeah. And that's kind of what got me bummed out because, and I think it's going to only get worse. I think the judicial system right now is, it's in a mess in a lot of ways. I just think as somebody that kills people or rapes people or molests kids, I want to see these people held accountable, man.
Of course.
And I think sometimes people aren't.
Yeah.
And that's the part for me where I started to feel like the system is truly flawed.
No, I felt the same way. And I guess, that was another sort of major reason that I decided to go to law school was kind of the same reason that I went into law enforcement. Instead of complaining about something, I was the guy, don't just complain, I'm going to do it. And in my mind, do it better. And so, when I left law enforcement, I there was no doubt in my mind I was going to be a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And instead of, I thought, I could read these reports and read between the lines and understand why, a simple resisting arrest means more. You got to prosecute those because, it leads to, if you don't, you let it go, it emboldens people,
Big time.
I certainly thought when I left that's what I was going to do. And my goal was to do that. The same thing when I went into law enforcement was, I'm going to do it and I'm going to try to do it better.
I agree. When DA's offices passed on you, did it feel political or personal?
Well, I don't, it felt personal with Kings County. So I didn't apply for Tulare County. It's where I would have worked, except for I had a falling out with the current DA because I
felt it ain't so.
Yeah, I felt like that his position was a little too political. I know he's a politician, but I felt like he did some things that were completely inconsistent with with his oath of office. So I didn't try to apply or work for Tulare County because I knew that wasn't going to go anywhere.
I tell you something, what he did to Ralph and Shaney, to me, that sealed it for me because I respect both of them big time. And when that happened, that rocked the law enforcement community, man. And a lot of us, I was upset about it because I love Ralph. I love Shaney. I think some things were done that were not done right, and two people lost their careers. In fact,
and his wife.
Well,
Ralph's
also,
wife.
yeah.
Shane,
and I will tell you this, dude. Ralph to this day does not know why he got fired.
Yeah.
When he asked him, flat out, Tim told him, "I can't tell you."
Right.
How does that make sense, dude?
I don't know.
I mean, I know they're at will, but at least have a reason. You know what I'm saying?
Or I mean, I'm not a fan of fabricating, but come up with something. But I mean, to that point, what he did to you was what sealed it for me.
Yeah.
Because coming after, if I recall, I mean, you were helping Ralph on your day off.
I was
on a weekend in plain clothes, and there was some sort of complaint claiming you were in uniform, being inappropriate.
There was,
right?
and I will tell you something like this. We would show up at the functions together, so it would be me and Ralph. And I mean, there was one time, man, Tim told me right to my face, he goes, "You're the politician, Jay," because I would walk around and, I could talk to anybody.
Yeah,
so I'm the guy working the room.
Yeah.
Right. And, but yeah, when I tried to get a job with a DA's office, dude, I mean, you could almost see the people interviewing me. It was almost like this. This is a total waste of time.
Right. Well, and I felt like that's what would have happened with my career. He would have hired me, I have no doubt, because of my background, but I would never promoted. I would have gotten, I'm pretty sure, assigned to the junk unit. And I liked Fresno County. I interned with them. I didn't, try to work there after law school. I didn't want to do that commute. In Kings County, I would have done that, but that felt, at the time, it felt really personal because I was interning there right before I graduated law school. And I had, and this is part on me, I didn't know, I had sort of expected, everybody liked me there, including the DA, and I really liked him, Keith Fagundes.
I liked Keith too.
Yeah.
I remember when Keith was here in Tulare County.
Yeah. But I was hoping that when I graduated law school, I could say that I had a job offer. And I wouldn't, and I asked him, and he said, my official position is that you're encouraged to apply. And I took that really hurts because I thought, I thought we had some chemistry here. I thought we were doing great. And I didn't realize, and this was just, again, just me thinking about my own self, that, for a government employee, for a DA's office to offer a job to somebody that they apparently haven't flown to the public is inappropriate, and I didn't learn that until later. And, he, we went out to lunch and he offered me a job after I was already practicing. When he had an opening, but so it felt personal at the time, but I think that was probably more on me than them.
I'll tell you a crazy story about Keith. I do a lot of public speaking, so I get called from some people, and they're like, "Hey, we need somebody to go over and give a speech in Hanford to some Rotarians at lunch." Okay?
Yeah.
And so, I do this stuff and I'm like, all right, and I don't get paid to do it. However, they were like, hey, well, we'll give you a free lunch. And I was like, all right, fair enough, right? So I get my monkey suit, drive over there. It's me and Julie and another PI, and Keith's there. This is when I knew that Keith was not going to get reelected. Keith is sitting at a table. The sitting DA, he's sitting at a table. Nobody is sitting with him. Ooh. 8 open chairs with a room full of people. Me and Julian feel bad for him, so we go over there and sit with him. And afterwards, after my speech, me and Julian sit there and talk to Keith for, 20 minutes. And I've always liked him. But I remember thinking, if you're in a room with 80 to 100 people and nobody's sitting with you at your table, you are not going to get reelected. And dude, I should have bought lottery tickets that day because I hit that thing right on the mark. A few months later, they had the election, and he did not get reelected. But that right there is when I was like, wow, you know what I mean? Let's shift gears. This is the tough one. How did you find out your brother was murdered, and why was it so brutal?
Oh, I found out through a series of unfortunate phone calls and Google searches and social media posts. So, sitting there,
because you were in law school, right?
Yeah. I was in my, I think my second or third year, 2015. I was in my third year, February 6th. And I get a phone call from a good friend, former partner of mine, Jeff Dowling. And
love that dude, by the way.
I love him. And he says, "Hey, man, I'm so sorry. But do you need any help with your daughter? My ex-wife and I at the time, she was my wife. We had a 1-year-old, and I said,
And that's an odd thing to ask when
Yes.
you don't know what's going on at that point.
Well, and he called. I'll tell you that it was about 4 hours after he was discovered. About
Okay.
5 hours after the murder.
What time real fast, what time was he killed?
So it was between 11:30 in the morning. No, well, I'll tell you, it was quicker because he got home. She was in the house, and it was I want to say probably about 1:30 in the afternoon.
1:30 in the afternoon. Okay.
He had a 3 p.m. shift.
Okay. I will tell you this. We started getting calls, and people automatically assumed it was the gangsters because he was living in Goshen.
Yeah.
And people thought it was gang members who had killed him.
Mm-hmm.
There was serious talk, bro, of going out there and handling business, dude.
Yeah.
And because people, I can tell you this, and saying it right now, I get emotional because we were pissed.
Yeah.
We were pissed, bro. And I was like, I remember saying something to somebody over the phone. One of those guys had the fucking balls to kill one of us.
To go into his house and do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, dude, I mean, and I remember, dude, we were suiting up, and then I get a call. Hey, dude, stand down. That's not what we think it is, dude. And it was the wife.
Yeah.
And I was, dude, those words, I remember coming over the phone. I was sitting there going, what the fuck?
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, man, dude, but
No. Well, and no. Yeah. So it was. So he called, and he. So I said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And he said, and it clicked. It clicked for him that I didn't know.
yeah.
That nobody had said anything to me, and there was no. I'm the first. First of kin. No. I'm the closest one that would have been him.
Well, and everybody in this community knows that you guys are twins,
Right. Well, and that's,
you would,
that's
and like in my mind, if I'd have been out there, I'd have been like, dude,
Call his brother,
let's call the brother, dude.
and I'll tell you, that's why it was so hurtful because, and really so tough because, so he called, and then it clicked for him that I had no idea, and all he said, you don't know. And I said, no, what? And he says, they're investigating a suspicious, and what he said was a suspicious death in Goshen, and it looks like it's your brother's house. And I'm like, what? And I think we disconnected. And so I'm like, what the hell? And so I start, Googling and, suspicious, looking at the news. And then I see, suspicious death being investigated, Goshen. And I see, it's a picture of my brother's house. And then I'm like, oh shit. And then about that, just shortly after, another guy I used to work with, Rick Carrillo,
here comes the phone calls, the barrage of phone calls.
He calls and he says, hey, I'm just checking in on you. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Nobody's told me. I have no idea what happened. All I know is there's a suspicious death, and it's maybe my brother's house. And he says, it is your brother's house,
Yeah.
It's Daniel's house. And so I'm like, okay, well, who, because he had a son. And he's like, well, I shouldn't be the person telling you this.
Well, shit. At that point, I'd be like, hey, man, spit it, dude. Whatever you know, dude.
He did. And I said, Rick, I have no idea. Like, you need to tell me. And he said, it is your brother.
Oh, shit.
And so I'm like, okay. And so then I get a call literally from somebody I'm going to law school with, who sees people posting on my Facebook account giving condolences, and
Dude,
they're like,
that's such a fucked up way to find this shit out.
Dispatchers, and this person, from law school is like, is it your daughter? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I have no idea. And so then I'm getting on Facebook, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for your loss, and it's not my daughter. So I'm like, okay, my brother's dead. And then I had to call my sister.
Oh, shit. Yeah, dude.
And I didn't know anything, but, I had to tell her. And that was the hardest. I've done death notifications, but that was the hardest call I've ever had to have.
I have no doubt, dude.
My parents didn't give a shit, they were out of our lives, but that was hard.
I will tell you something, bro. I had to give my sister's death notification to my mom. And whatever magic my mom had, it took it that day.
Yeah.
And I will tell people this, man. That day, I could still remember it like it was yesterday, man, because, dude, it rocked our community, dude. Yeah. I mean, for a police officer to be killed, number one, that's a big deal. It's a big deal anywhere, but Tulare County, we're big, but we're so small. Yeah. Everybody knows everybody. And when that came out, bro, I could tell you something. I remember sitting there going, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
What hurt more, losing him or how the system managed it?
Well, what hurt more at the time was how it was handled.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't...
somebody dropped a ball on that major.
So I ended up calling the sheriff's department and saying, dispatch, like, is somebody going to give me a death notification and tell me what's going on? I got the runaround and, we'll do this. And
how easy would it have been for the detective sergeant to just call you up and say, hey, man, this is what's going on out here. We're really sorry. We're in the middle of the investigation. We'll keep you apprised. It doesn't cost nothing to be nice to nobody during that time, dude. Yeah. It could have been that. And that's the tough part. It could have been that easy.
Yeah. Well, I thought so. If dispatchers for the agency I used to work with already knew and were posting on social media, I think somebody could have given me a call.
Damn right.
And I did. Ron, I think it was Ron Smith, came by not too long, and then Sheriff Boudreau came to my house. And so they came in, and I don't fault. Maybe everybody assumed somebody had already told me. But the next part that really, it was getting the details, because I'm asking questions. How did my brother die? I had no idea.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I talked to Rick Creel again and he said firearm. And,
well, there's a couple of things. First thing you start, is it self-inflicted?
Well,
somebody break in?
I hate to say that, but it was an actual question. I was going to say,
but that's the cop in us. We start going down the list. Was it this? Was it this? Was it this? Yes.
And I didn't get that answer until after midnight. It took 4 hours after he died before somebody said he was murdered. And
see, brother, and this is when the system is so fucked up because guess what, dude? Somebody should have told you immediately. This is what we got. I know that camera across the street had picked her up going in and coming out and all that. Dude, how quickly? Well, they should have told you all that.
Well, they could have said real quick that it was a murder because there's 4 shell casings and no firearm.
Correct.
Obviously, you can't shoot yourself 4 times and then disappear.
And then the gun just walk off. Yeah.
So, I mean, that part was tough. But then even, nobody wanted to talk. Even after she was arrested, I literally found out the details from people gossiping to others, and then get it back to, I learned.
And I was going to say, getting any information third hand or second hand, you're already like, man, what the hell?
I learned most of the details from the girl he was dating at the time.
What time did she get arrested?
That was the next day in the afternoon.
Okay.
I believe. Or 2 days. It was the next day.
I know that you fought for his son while grieving. How close did you come to breaking during that time? And I'll bet you there's a part of you that probably did.
Well, I don't, I'll say actually I didn't, because I just went into, and I paid the price years later, but I just went into a mode of taking care of business. Taking care of my family, my sister. Nobody was there to organize anything.
Yeah.
So I had to take care of, his funeral arrangements. I had to, find out what was happening with his, his son. Called CWS. Like, where's his son? We're with all this. So I just went into work mode. And I didn't grieve actually his murder until later because I had to take care of the family.
Yeah, too much. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're just being bombarded at that point, dude.
Yeah. So it was just, work, take care of this, take care of, hold the family together. And so that's the mode that I was in. I don't feel like it started to break me until it started to sink in, which is, in the weeks, I'd pull out my phone to text him.
Oh, yeah.
And then be like, oh, he's gone.
Yeah.
So it did take a while to sink in. And I think it's, which I don't understand because I was dealing with everything, even after his funeral, I would go to text him and be like, what am I doing?
What was the exact date when all that happened?
He died on February 6, 2015.
15. When the first trial ended in a mistrial, did you already know that justice was kind of slipping by at that point?
I did. Dave Alaveso's prosecuting. He did a fabulous job.
Yeah. He's like, he is their heavy hitter there. That's for sure.
And he not only did a fabulous job, but he had to actually, unfortunately, deal with his own trauma, towards the end. But
he lost a family member, right?
His son.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, towards the end. But I saw in the first week, I sat through every day of that trial. And the first one was about 2 months. But I saw a juror. Who, I'm paying attention, right? Who very clearly was not acting like every other juror. She was paying attention when the, defense was talking, and she was indifferent, not taking notes when the prosecution was going at it. She wouldn't look at us. My sister would break down crying, and the jurors would look, and she wouldn't. She never made eye contact with any of us. And I remember, I saw that in the first week, and I think maybe after 2 or 3 weeks, I even said a comment to Dave. I said, that juror is a problem. Like, she's doing something different here. She's not listening to the facts. She's completely closed-minded, when you're putting on your case. And, it turned out it turned out to be the case. She had apparently, in listening to the jurors afterwards, she had even acknowledged that she, as soon as deliberation started, she was not going to find guilty. And so apparently there was some fighting between jurors, and they kind of laid into her with her closed-mindedness. And, Yeah, she had made up her mind, and I think before the case even started, for whatever reason, that she was just not going to find her guilty.
Yeah, and again, that's when the system is jacked. I mean, it really is. Watching them tear your brother apart in court, what did that do to you?
It tore me apart.
I bet.
And it tore me apart, and it just made it even harder trying to explain to my family why that's allowed to happen. Not that it should. I expected some degree of that because, she was guilty of sin, She admitted to it. She confessed to breaking into his house, waiting, and then killing him.
Which is all premeditation. Yeah.
And yet we're putting on a trial where 90% of the defense is talking about, whether he was texting two women at the same time, a year before he died, or, saying mean, sending her mean text 2 years before she murdered him. And none of it having to do with her just explaining why. And I think the why is clear, she's one of those people, it was going to be her way or no way. If I can't have you, nobody else can. He told her no. He had just started dating somebody new, and she wasn't going to allow it. And then to see them put on an entire case where we're having to listen for days and days and days, text messages that he was texting other people having
Which
nothing
is all
to do with
irrelevant.
it, but just to make him look bad, just to drag him through the mud, and then going home and like a train wreck, not wanting to watch the media but seeing the media selectively.
Oh yeah.
We're selectively, either report on or display recordings of parts of the trial. It was.
Well, at that point, now they're just trying to convict him in the court of public opinion. And, do you believe the jury knew she was guilty?
Yes.
Okay.
She admitted to it,
Yeah.
Yeah, they knew.
I was going to ask you this. Why didn't, I remember thinking this at the time, why didn't they just go, the jury just found out that one hung jury, she wasn't going to convict her on anything?
Yeah.
Wow. And that's sad because for the folks at home, that means 11 jurors wanted her to be guilty. One juror can throw that whole thing in flux.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And that's horrible. Do you think they chose exhaustion over the truth? Or there was nothing they were going to do to be able to get that one juror to...
On that one, no.
Yeah.
Well, because it was, I think they deliberated for 5 days. I think she made
That's a long
made
time.
it clear from the absolute beginning. So I think for 5 days, the rest of those jurors tried to wear her down in the first trial.
Yeah.
And when they decided that they were not going to change her mind, when it was clear to her that she was not there to be a juror and review the facts, I think they decided she's so set in her way. She was so set in her ways. I don't think any amount of time would have.
I was going to say, there just comes a point in time that then it is what it is. Has that experience permanently changed how you view juries and verdicts?
I guess it should, but I don't think so. We put 12 people, and I don't think jurors are stupid, but there's some saying, from some movie, I think somewhere, a jury is, 12 people that were too stupid to get out of jury duty. I don't agree with that mentality, but, I actually, I guess, give a ton of respect for 12 people plus the alternates who sat there for months, giving up their own life, listening to all of that. So it has changed me, actually. I guess even though I really don't like the way that either one of those trials turned out, I have so much more respect for juries and a juror who would sit there and listen to what I had to listen to for months. The first trial was 2 months, the second one closer to 4.
Oh, wow.
With the breaks. And so, as much as I disagree with both outcomes, I have a lot more respect for juries.
Yeah. Who are you angry at now? The people who hurt you, or the system that let it happen?
The people. And when I say people, I mean the defense attorney. Like, I get it. I love and respect the Constitution, and I understand that everybody's entitled to a defense. But I just can never get on board with the idea that somehow you're defending somebody for a murderer when they've confessed to it by dragging the victim through the mud. That's not justice. By any
totally
shape
agree with.
or
I
form.
totally agree with you, brother.
That that's just it's not even close to justifiable. Having to listen to his text messages between somebody else when she admitted to what she did, but just to make him look bad, hoping that a jury will dislike him while she's sitting there fake, dressed up, smiling and laughing. Yeah, it's those defense attorneys, it's those public defenders that sold their soul for this idea that whether individually that's what they have to do to sleep at night because they represent dirtbags, but there's no part of that. What they did was representing justice.
Yeah. Did surviving all this cost you something you'll never get back?
Yeah. My love for humanity.
Yeah.
My hope for humanity.
I could see that. Yeah, dude. I could tell you this, man. When I've told some people you were going to come on here, especially cops, former cops, current cops, everybody, our general consensus is, number one, we love you. I totally respect you. But the shit that you had to go through during these trials, bro, I think it would have rocked anybody, dude.
Yeah.
And you were well liked in our community, still are. Your brother was well liked in our community, still is. And I just think that most cops, when we were watching this shit go down, especially when that first trial was hung, dude, I was pissed, and I wasn't even in the courtroom, man, but I was like, how the hell does this happen? I mean, we already knew about all this evidence and then, her giving a statement and all this other. I'm like, this should have been a slam dunk, easy thing. And it wasn't. And the amount of shit that you guys had to go through during this, especially that second trial, which we'll get to in a minute. It's just, dude, this is when you realize life is not fair. The system is flawed. And then this is when things truly fall through the cracks that matter.
Right.
Would you choose this path again, knowing everything you know now?
Which path?
Well, the path of law enforcement, the path of law school. Would you choose this path? Not the path of losing your brother, obviously, but
yes. And I say because it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, for others and even for ourselves. But to say, well, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. I don't know what those results would have been.
yeah,
I mean, everybody lives with doubts, and but I've gotten through so far in my life by looking forward.
Yeah.
When you spend time looking over your shoulder, you trip over what's in front of you. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just sort of, I guess, one thing that's kept me moving forward is not looking back. I I don't like what I'm doing now. I would like to be prosecuting people. I think I do miss public service. I really do. I miss feeling like, and I try to make up for it in other ways, but I miss putting bad guys away.
I think that'll always be in your heart, brother.
Yeah. But it is what it is. And I also feel, though, that sometimes we're meant to do things. When one door closes, another one opens. And I feel like I do some good with what I'm doing, but I guess all in all, I have regrets, but I don't know that I would change much of anything. Because then where would I be? I have no idea.
If there is a young kid growing up in chaos, and here's your story, what would you want them to know?
Don't let your circumstances define you. Don't. So many people get caught up in being a victim of circumstance and then using that victimization to define them. And I don't agree with that. Life sucks for a lot of people. And I think, it's easy. And I don't say that to minimize other people's harms, but it's easy to say, well, this happened to me, so, I'm just going to be a victim of circumstance, even if it's not a conscious decision. But what I would say is that we, not to sound a little too, ideological, but we live in a society where there's so many options and there's so many doors open to people that are willing to work hard. And I disagree completely that somebody cannot overcome their circumstances by making good choices and working hard. I grew up with other people in my same neighborhood, and while they were out partying and having fun, I was working.
Yeah.
And then they stayed in that same environment. And so I really struggle to be empathetic towards people in that same environment. And it sounds bad, but if you make the choice to overcome those circumstances and even claw your way out, then I think that's a possibility, but only if you make the work, the ethic, and the effort. And it's, I guess, finally, just don't allow yourself to be stuck, climb your way out of whatever you're going through and make your own destiny, create it. Not everybody's handed, and there are so many people handed an easy life, but I don't think that's an excuse to not do something with your life. You don't have to be handed something to do something. You can do it yourself. And this is a country that was found on those principles.
I totally agree.
And it still exists. I just think that too many people use their own unfortunate circumstances as a scapegoat or an excuse or a crutch. And I just can't get behind that.
I totally get it. Reverting back real fast on that second trial when she was finally convicted, how did that feel?
It felt good. It felt good. It felt good until we learned that they weren't going to find her guilty of lying in wait, which she admitted to doing.
Yeah.
So that was, it was bittersweet.
So did it knock it down to second degree or?
No, it's still first. But the issue is because of some change in the law that without that, finding that special allegation true of lying in wait, she couldn't do LWOP, life without the possibility of parole. So she basically, for the murder and the gun enhancement, is serving 25 years to life, which could mean 50 to life. But with this other law, she'll actually be eligible for parole in 11 years because of her age, because she didn't have a prior strike before the age of 25. I think is this new, thanks to
Governor. I would hope she pulls at least, if not all that time, at least 85%. You would hope.
I will be there at every parole hearing.
Oh yeah. Good man. For the folks at home, Matthew adopted his brother's son and now raises him. And everybody in the law enforcement community, including me. I respect the hell out of that. I really do. I remember when all that was going down. When your name is spoken, bro, it's spoken with reverence. It truly is. And because you went through something that not a lot of people go through, man. And so just know this. I have a ton of respect for you. And I don't look up to a lot of people, but I look up to you.
Well, thank you.
And are you still trying to save someone, or are you finally trying to save yourself?
You know, I think I'm done trying to save people.
Yeah.
You know, in the sense, and on that, I'll tell you that I love that boy, and it was tough for a lot of years, no joke. I mean, maybe, in trying to raise somebody to not hate, to let him form his own opinions, we never told him, he has questions, right? Never told him, hey, your mom's evil. We understood he had to form his own opinions. And, trying to explain to a 3-year-old, why his mom would kill his dad there's no book. There's no book on that.
There is no book, dude.
And that was so tough. But I'll tell you, he has an amazing heart. And, fortunately, I guess the timing, when this happened, he was 2. And so he doesn't have a memory of his parents, although, he has pictures of them. And so I think that he's tried to form his own memories.
Yeah.
But I'm at the point where, that was a serious question, where I feel like I need to kind of work back on myself and repairing the damage that, that has been done by being a machine that just worked and worked. And when I say work, not just literally, but putting everybody else first and trying to be strong for your kids and your family. It's broken me down. And so I'm at that stage where I'm like, if I'm going to keep doing this, I've got to do some repairs on myself, because, those things are checked off. She's in prison. He's doing so well. He's such a loving, bright, energetic, happy boy.
Love to hear it, dude.
But I am a little past working on other people and getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I have to do some damage repair here and get back on track. I used to have so much motivation and, I was unstoppable for a period of time where that's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
So I got to get that back.
Yeah, but you know what, bro? I'm going to tell you something, man. Me and you are like more than what you think, dude. And, I will tell you something, man. There's something about guys like us. We work hard. In fact, we almost work too hard, and we pour everything into it. But the important things start to slip through the cracks. And so, well, brother, we're going to wrap this up, but before we do, I just want to let you know it's been a true honor to have you come on here. I think you are a good man. I think you're doing what's best for you and your family. I have a ton of respect for you. I know, every time Ralph always speaks very highly of you. Everybody who truly knows you, I have never heard anybody trash you, ever. And before we wrap up, is there anything you would like to say?
Well, I want to thank you, actually, for having me on. and I really appreciate what you've done with this podcast and, the work that you've done to, through you, been a vessel of other people sharing their stories and their experiences. And, hopefully enlightening others. I hope this blows up and that other people see these so that they can understand, either, why people do what they do, or specifically, those in law enforcement. I think I'm a little bit different than most of your people because I don't have a big career and never got, shot at or shot anybody. But what you're doing is also hard. And so I guess that's my last thing is I want to thank you for what you're doing. And having me on and asking tough questions, unfortunately, we live in a society where people don't want to ask or answer tough questions. And, and if nothing else, the people that you've helped, with these interviews, I want to thank you.
Dude, you're welcome, dude.
And I've said this, and I mean it. I don't look up to a whole lot of people, but I've always had a ton of respect for you as well. So thank you for your service and what you've done.
I appreciate that. I'm truly trying to highlight people in our community, people in Tulare County, because I think because we live between San Francisco and Sacramento and LA, I think our stories tend to get overshadowed.
Yeah.
And so I'm really trying to show people the price that this takes. You are my first attorney on here. And when I thought of an attorney, you're the first person that popped in my head. And I love the fact I reached out to you and you said immediately, let's do it. And I love that. Because I've had a lot of people, dude, that me and you both know, bro, that I've asked them to come on here. And a lot of people have turned me down and said, it's not really my thing. I'm a quiet person. I want to forget that time of my life or whatever. But, I just love the fact you reached out. I think you got a great story. I wish you and your family nothing but health and happiness. You deserve every good thing that this life has to offer. You've earned it. I will leave you with a quote. Justice isn't clean. It's argued over by imperfect people inside an imperfect system on behalf of imperfect truths. Dude, I think our whole episode encapsulates that right there. The minute I saw that quote, I was like, dude, this is it.
Yeah.
And so
I have a quote for you.
Yes.
And it got me through so much of my life or what drove me in the beginning years, especially, and that is, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Damn right.
By Edmund Burke. And that I tried to use that to embody what I did in law enforcement. And I know that you did as well. But I think that was equally,
Dude, it is. And I will tell you something, man. I've had some people ask me out in the community, hey, dude, what, dude, those are some hardcore questions. And I'm like, listen, if people are going to get into healing, we have to confront things that have happened.
Yeah.
And, your brother's situation, that's a hard situation, dude. I mean, even asking these questions, they're hard on me.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that you were willing to step into them, lean into them, and answer honestly and truthfully, because guess what? I know it's not easy. That part of that will be with you till the day you die, brother.
Yeah.
Your sister, where's she at now?
Washington.
Yeah. Okay. Is she doing well?
She's great. I love her. She's great. This whole thing brought us really close together. And I'll tell you, she drove down here and flew back and forth. She has a family, my nephew, niece, and brother-in-law, her husband. And she was at both trials too, and in fact, there were days that I missed because, I had trials or whatever. She didn't miss a day. She didn't miss a day during either trial. She sacrificed more during those trials than I did,
Well, you know what? That's what family is, bro.
Yeah.
You know what, man? I tell you something, dude. I'm living my best life right now. I truly am, dude. And you know, man, I have to take stock of sometimes of all the traumatic things that I've seen and done. And you know, there's times, man, I didn't think I would be sitting here, bro. But you know what, man? For whatever reason, the good Lord gave me a strength and gave me clarity. And this right here, this is my calling.
So maybe it's where you're meant to be right now.
No, it is.
So
it
keep
is.
doing it.
No, it is. I'm not going to stop, dude. The fact that this is healing people, it's healing relationships. It's giving people a voice to come on here. This is what I was born to do. And well, folks, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, this is my guest, Matthew Green. Y'all keep watching. I just got done with my second book. It'll be out in June. Also pick up a first copy of my book. It's on Amazon. Welcome to the show that never ends. And with that, I'll leave you with good luck, God bless, and Godspeed. Thank you.